Buffalo Bugles. So I suck that down.
Oh, yeah. I was actually at McDonald's thinking, what would Tom think of this?
I would love it. I'd be proud.
I topped it off with a peppermint patty.
Yeah, I had a cookie.
Oh, it's so bad for me. It is.
Oh, you should. What's up? I don't know where her grew up yet, but.
You've timed out.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, residents of Litchfield, and welcome to the January 7th, 2015 school board meeting. I'd like to wish everyone a happy new year, and then I'd like to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any revisions to the agenda, Dr. Summary of non-public from December 17th, 2014, non-public session. Mr. York made a motion to approve the revised language and administrative contract. Mr. Barker seconded the motion. Motion carried 5-0-0. Mrs. Prindle made a motion to approve revised language in the school year plus administrative contract. Mr. York second. The motion carried 5-0-0. That was it for non-public. Presentations and recognition. We have with us this evening, we've been looking for a few weeks, I think, Gabrielle Desjardins, who won, someone's going to help me out exactly what this is the 2015 NAFME Eastern Division Orchestra. So congratulations. Congratulations. Thank you very much. Tell us exactly what that is.
Yeah.
So everyone knows.
Do I need to speak in anything particular? Or? On the
Just
corner?
Yeah.
All right. I got accepted into All Eastern, which is pretty much a step above All State. And All State is every year all the musicians that want to apply go to which school? Memorial. And we audition with prepared pieces that we've prepared for a couple months. And from those people, the top of the class, I guess you could say, get selected. And depending on what your extracurricular activities and what you do or how you do it in school and all the other stuff comes into play, they select you for All Eastern. And this year they selected, I believe it's 4 people from New Hampshire. And I was the only one that made orchestra on bassoon, so I'm the only one from New Hampshire. That makes
Excellent. Well, congratulations again.
Thank you.
Now you could get your bassoon. So we're going to do a short presentation, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So kind of talk about yourself.
All right, so a student model bassoon is, I don't know, upwards of like $9,000, and like if you're going semi-pro, you could probably get like a cheap one for around 15, and if you're going like all out, like this is what you're gonna do for the rest of your life, you can aim to be spending as much as a car, like 23, on a quality instrument. And a little bit about the instrument. I don't know if you guys have ever seen one. This is the bassoon. Not a lot of people play them. This year we had 17 people try out in All-State compared to like the 50s of flutes that try out.
80.
80. And people have speculated that it's a really hard instrument. That's why not a lot of people try to play it. It's played on a double reed, which means it's instead of having a mouthpiece, all you blow is on 2 pieces of bamboo, and that's what get the resonance for the pitch to come out. And so I have 12 thumb keys, and total of something like 30 keys overall to make sound. It's not as hard as people think, but it's quite unique sounding instrument, in my opinion.
And when did you start?
Oh, all right. I started in 6th grade. In 5th grade, we had to pick an instrument. I used to live in Rhode Island, and I started on clarinet, which is pretty standard for any woodwind, saxophone. And my music teacher told me, hey, would you like to try out bassoon? And I straight out told him no, that I wouldn't like it. And, and after some persuasion from my parents, I tried it out and I fell in love with it immediately. And after a couple months of playing in band, I quickly got ahead of the game and surpassed everyone. So I started taking private lessons, and ever since like middle of 6th grade, I've been taking private lessons, and
You still do?
I still do, yeah. So that's my history.
Great. Any questions about the bassoon? We actually have 2 here at Campbell High School, and Gabe has actually taken a 9th grader under his wing.
Yeah.
And his Star Wars lingo. He's got his, his Jedi Knight apprentice, and so he's working on him and went with him. And so we're very grateful for that.
Yeah.
So I figured while I had you caught and captured, so we'll do a double demonstration here. So you've heard us talk sometimes about Smart Music, and it's a program we use in a lot of the music courses. It does a million things, but we'll show you one thing in particular. So this is a band arrangement. It isn't particularly hard, but so I could pass this piece out to the band, and then the students can practice with it. And they actually have a band accompaniment. It's not a keyboard accompaniment or something that's kind of generated in a studio. It's a real band. So they can hear how it should sound. I'm convinced to this day that it's had a lot to do with the growth of the Litchfield music program, because we use it at the middle school and the high school. So students don't have to practice and avoid. They can actually hear what their part sounds like, which is not always easy. They can isolate their part if they want to practice it. It'll give them a score. It'll correct things. It won't correct them on the screen. It'll show them on the screen what they've done right, what they've done wrong. We won't score them tonight, but it would give them a score. It would give them a screenshot, and if he plays a wrong note, it would show him what the right note is. And then when he's done, he could send that to me. And so I have a portfolio, all my students. I can collect all of that data. I hear how they play. I get the screenshots, right notes or wrong notes. But the part that's really kind of interesting is the students, of course, can do it multiple times. So they'll want to better their score. It's kind of gaming mentality, right? Video gaming. So I can get a better score. I can get a better score. So some students will spend how much time, Mrs. Callahan?
Many weeks. On
Many
some
weeks.
pieces, yes.
And what's the hidden agenda? They're practicing. Don't tell them that. So this is just, I just wanted you to kind of see how this sounded and how it worked. Like I say, you're not going to see the scoring feature. We don't want to put Gabe on the spot. But you kind of get to hear Gabe and a little bit about what Smart Music is. Are you ready, Gabe?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
And like I said, if he was doing that for class, it would score him. It would give him his score. It would send all that to me. I could listen to it. I can comment back. I can say, this was good, work on this, think about this, concentrate on that. I can give them scales. I can give them etudes. I can give them, there's 50,000 tunes in Smart Music. So I think it's an amazing tool.
So this installed on a home computer? And use it?
So you have a choice. We buy a school subscription, and then, so we have it in the practice rooms, but we have 3 practice rooms and 130 music students, so many will choose to get it at home, which is actually a great option. It's the rate to get a home subscription is $50 a year, and you can, if there's multiple members of the family that play, they can all still use the same account. You don't have to buy multiple accounts. So they have the option of doing it here, or they can take it home to it.
That's pretty cool.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Welcome.
So what's the name of it?
I'll take mine out.
No, what's the name of it?
Oh, Smart Music?
And next, we have an anonymous donation for CHS Science.
Actually, to interject on that one, because the donation is over $5,000, we have to hold a public hearing to accept it.
Okay,
So the public hearing is going to be scheduled for the January 21st meeting.
okay. All right.
We have at the same time information from the high school of whether or not there's enough equipment, what equipment would need to be repaired, what equipment needs to be purchased, whatever, because the request here was pretty specific on this donation. And I think before the school board should elect to accept the donation, we need to realize whether or not we can actually use it all per the instructions of the person who sent the letter and the donation. So, and if Campbell High School could have something for us, pretty detailed of how that money would be used, I think that would be be good for the board to, whether or not we should accept it or not, based on the donation.
Yeah, based on our recent conversations, I would say that would be no problem, but it
No
would be helpful
problem.
to show
They're very
what good things
excited
that money is going to go
about this,
towards.
And we can put that together. We just, got the donation late afternoon yesterday, so, but the science team, just even looking at cuts that we made in science budgets and equipment that we need, it would be very easily spent and deeply appreciated.
Very exciting. That's very generous.
Pretty
Yeah.
generous.
Yes, very just.
Could you get that to us, Lori, before the meeting?
Yes, absolutely.
We don't meet for 2 weeks, correct?
Right.
Without giving-
So if we can have it before the meeting, not before
It's
the
almost like
acceptance.
Christmas, so yeah, it's like, we can do.
Excellent. It is like Christmas.
Me not having a meeting for 2 weeks is like Christmas?
That too. I didn't say
That
it.
exactly was like Christmas.
It actually is.
You don't get off that easy, you have a budget hearing next week.
Yeah. All right. Next, it brings us correspondence. I received one from Dennis Miller inquiring about a policy and report, CM, that had not been completed when he left, that was due. And I spoke to Dr. Cochran about it, and when it comes to superintendent comments, we'll discuss it. And again, the policy was CM. If anyone else had any other correspondence? Alright. Next is the approval of minutes from 12/17.
I had a change. The section on the reduction of the school bus reduction.
What page?
Find it if you want to see if there's any other changes that anybody had.
Did anyone have any questions on the minutes?
Bottom of page 2, line, starts in 105. Dr. Cochran commented, he raised the point that we have lower ridership, but we still have to cover, that should be the same roads. And while some stops may disappear, it is more likely others will simply have fewer students. So the point was that even with decreased ridership, you still have to cover the same roads, and you still have to cover essentially the same stops, except you might have 4 kids getting on the stop instead of 5.
Is there anything else?
Nope, that was it.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
We're good. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Everybody's here, right? Yeah. 500. That'll bring us to community forum.
Good evening. Chris Pascucci, 12 Colonial. Thank you. I know all the school board, Board of Selectmen, Budget Committee are making an extra effort this year to try and get more people into the ownership of their town and school government, which is a great thing. Chairman of the Budget Committee wrote a letter to the HLN trying to invite people, and I think that's a good move, and it's well appreciated by all boards. If all people elected to town and school could help spread the word to get people more into the system throughout the entire process, that's important. I know a lot of people are afraid to get into the process because not fully familiar with how things work. And years ago, I was the same way. It's sometimes intimidating. So as much as you guys can talk about it and help inform and answer questions, again, I think that'd be very helpful. If every year we could bring a few more people into this process, it's a great thing. Once a year, we have the opportunity to talk about the default budget. The good news is the subject's coming up a lot less nowadays than it was years ago. That's great. There still are a lot of people that don't understand how the default budget is calculated or how it works. And a few years ago, there was a couple petition warrant articles to transfer the creation of the default budget to the Budget Committee, which failed. But I remember there was a lot of community input about that, saying they'd rather keep it, for example, with the school board, because the school board members know the needs and the wants of the school system. And that's exactly what the default budget is not about. The default budget is simply a mathematical calculation, and it's as long as we keep talking about that and understand, and we all truly understand what a default budget is, that it's nothing to really be voted on to add things to it. It's a simple calculation of same level of appropriation, not same level of service. From the previous year. You add new contracts and leases, you subtract one-time expenditures. So for example, the teacher's contract, that goes in the default. Additional health benefits goes in the default. If electricity rates rise, that does not go in the default. Yeah, you do need to still heat the schools, but you could still do that with the bottom line. And also on the other side of it, sometimes there's more money in the default than what's needed on certain line items. But that's a legitimate expense in the default too. So if something went down, electric or something, you still put the previous higher number in the default. So it goes both ways. So the more we talk about it, and I do have to say it is the creation of the default budget is more accurate than it has been in years gone by, and the people of the town do appreciate that. Thank you.
Anyone else? Superintendent comments?
First, Policy CM. Policy CM is entitled School District Annual Report, and states an annual report covering the diversified activities of the district and the administration's recommendations for its improvement shall be prepared by the superintendent and presented to the board as soon as possible after the close of each school year. Upon board approval, the report shall be made available to the public and be used as one means for informing parents and citizens, the State Board of Education, and other school districts in the area of the programs and conditions of the schools. It's a fairly standard policy that a lot of districts have. It was approved on September 22nd, 2004. And I looked back through all of the minutes of all of the board meetings on the website, which goes back to sometime in 2011. And there's never been anything in the form of an annual report addressing this that I can find. I talked to Michelle about it. She indicated that the same as to my thinking, that is, there have been annual data reports that are presented to the board at times, but we're not sure whether or not it's actually taken this actual form. I think it's an important function, but that was not done in, to my knowledge, the at the end of the 11-12 year, at the end of the 12-13, or the 13-14 year. In the fall of 2012, one of the things that occurred in conversation with the board was a move away from annual goals to a longer-term plan, and the board approved a new plan, the 2012 to 15 strategic plan, with 3 broad areas of goals that were based very much on the former annual goals. And the rationale was essentially that there are a lot of good things that need far more than 1 year to occur. And so, in response to the request, I was putting together an annual 2013-14 summary. And then in finding that, in fact, since that function really hasn't occurred, and what I wanted to talk to the board about was actually changing. This is 2.5 years into a 3-year plan with strategic goals. So my preference would be, rather than summarizing only 13-14, would be to summarize where we are in terms of that strategic plan from 2012 to 14. Now, the other thing that's happened is that how to, improve the educational experience for students is not something, I think it's something the board has focused on very well in the last 2.5 years, and I think it's been a significant change in its focus, but it's not something that we do once a year. It's conversations that we have regularly now about programs and about where we're heading and why. So I'd like to follow up in a conversation that started over the summer, and that is a conversation of beginning a new strategic plan, 2 to 3 year strategic plan. And so that process would start with the presentation of the progress towards the goals established for the 2012 to 15 plan. And I would present that 2 weeks hence on January 21st with all of the data that we have, look at where we are, and have some conversations with the board about what sort of strategic planning process and what sort of model we would use. I think there's real value in annual goals, but annual goals by themselves have some issues. I think a longer-term plan that has annual milestones is a model that fits much better in education. So my desire would be to present that to the board in lieu of CM, and then have conversations about the strategic planning process, which would take us working at it bit by bit to the spring, so that as this school year concludes, we'll launch a new strategic, 2 to 3 year plan with annual benchmarks that principals and administrators in the schools could use to help set their goals. So,
Would giving a recap on an annual basis of the strategic plan?
would meet CM, yes.
So you-
That's a good idea, too. I don't think, we've never done this in my 3 years on the board. I don't remember it ever being done before that either, but it's a great idea, just to let the public know what we're doing, what our goals
Right.
are.
Oh,
Because
me too.
Well,
people are too busy to pay attention, but they can, if we share a document, they can read that and kind of get a gist of what the goals and stuff are and how we're doing against those goals. It's a great
I think it's
idea.
important too, Lee. He has a 3-year plan. Just, are we looking at it on a yearly basis? Where do we stand with that 3-year plan? And do we need to make any revisions or?
Adjust,
But-
yeah.
And quite honestly, it's one of the things that education does very poorly is educate people about the successes and how the money's being spent. A lot more districts are actually being a lot more proactive, because if you look at the things that have happened over the last couple of years, programmatic changes at the middle school with the lit technology, a new lab there, a new focus on research and writing, and looking at more research and more writing at a younger grade level than we've done it before, that we believe is having some success. The double math at grade 7, the new GMS lab. There are some people who know, because they're in and out of the building, that lab is there, that it's being used, that all these good things are going on. But the average voter out there doesn't see it and doesn't know about it. So I think one of the goals that I want to put in the strategic plan is to develop a better mechanism of both reporting how we're doing, the statistics and the report out of the CM type thing, but also give them more idea of where tax dollars are going, how they're being used, and how they're making a difference. Because I think we do a less than adequate job of that, because we're so busy trying to get the work done that we don't first of all, celebrate it with staff enough, the great job that they do, and also let people know the difference that the monies can make. So, the second part of the superintendent's comments deals with the meeting yesterday and the recommendation from the SIS search committee to move forward with approaching Infinite Campus as the new SIS for the school district. So there were two parts of the conversation. One part of the conversation was narrowed it down to two excellent products, vendor demonstrations, full day, site visits, full day. A lot of people invested a lot of time and effort in it. And while there's probably 90+% overlap between the two products, there was consistency across the members about, I think, that Infinite Campus was a better fit and what those advantages were. And those are outlined in the document, I think, quite well by Director Hancock. And the other piece that took probably as much time, if not more, was the concern that without the filling of that additional positions in the warrant article, any implementation based on the resource level that we have now would essentially be doomed to failure and result in a tremendous amount of frustration. And we do have some members of that committee here today, Mr. Cooper, who was involved in the site visits, and Director Callanan. So if they wanted to want to add any editorializing to the superintendent's comments.
I've used, of the two products that we have, our current product, it kind of like remember in the 80s. It's a lot of hand work. So anything is an improvement over what we have. And X2, again, the scheduling, both of them could do very similar things. Infinite Campus, just connectivity support was a more superior product. So that was really more what we were looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. And the site visits as well, to sort of reiterate what one of the other members had said, speaking with one of the administrators who's over at Bow, who also happens to be a former teacher in Litchfield, intimately aware of similar size schools, similar size district, what the concerns are from an administrative level, from a teacher's level, and, you know, certainly gave a good recommendation. So I thought when one of the other members brought that up, I thought that was a good sign. And I know from a teacher's standpoint, that was, like, the usability was much better than what we had.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, is this just an informant of us, or are we in a holding pattern until after the election?
The next step would be to have Director Hancock and I enter into a negotiations with Infinite Campus to develop a contract for services. But I think the execution of that contract will have to wait until the vote on Tuesday, March 10th. That would be my recommendation to the board.
So are you looking for a recommendation from the board to start that process with the idea that it could come to a screeching halt after whatever time of negotiating? Or is it something you feel you need to wait until after the March 10th election?
If we don't start that conversation until after the vote, we will not have sufficient time to implement next year anyway. So I think we have to invest the time and effort into developing the contract, start to look at a steering committee of administrators and staff to help us, look at what the rollout would be. Some of it is very technical, and it's database migration and scrubbing of data and pulling stuff out and cross-checking and all of that stuff. But then the real work becomes taking people who have been used to one system for a while and moving them to a system that works under essentially a different set of premises because it's a relational database, and also in a different environment. The amount of functionality is significantly more. And then the question becomes, what functionality would you turn on in year one? Everything we have now plus what? What's the highest priority? And then over time, how do we expand that and not overwhelm people with it? Because we do have a lot of other things going on in the district as well.
Since we're making a change in midstream this month with our director of IT, the new person that will be coming on board, how are they in this discussion and their skill set?
As it turns out, the person being recommended this evening actually has I would say, Mr. Cooper, we were involved in a very strong background in database management and has been involved in several data migrations. It would be similar to this, but in ERP systems in business. So actually, the fit to the task is quite good, quite good.
Well, then I'll make a motion that the SAU office begin the process of negotiating with the new student
Information system with Infinite Campus?
With Infinite, I closed it down, so I don't have the name.
Campus.
Campus. And begin that process with the idea of hopefully getting full board approval and sign up on a contract after the election.
Any further conversation? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained. 5-0-0.
In light of the fact that this is a warrant article, to some extent, we're going to have to double back and resell this as the values. So I would expect some presentation between now and March 10th to the board, and also perhaps include something significant in this way, either to the Budget Committee, because we probably want a recommendation we will have a recommendation on that warrant article from the Budget Committee, and potentially include it in the presentation at the deliberative as well, because of the importance of this function.
Well, we'll have a vote by the Budget Committee.
I'm sorry?
We'll have a vote by the Budget Committee.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll
That
have.
means that you probably have to have somebody here at the next meeting.
More than
No, for school board at our next meeting. Because then
yeah.
you have to present to the Budget Committee. Won't the Budget Committee meet after the 21st? When do you guys meet again?
Tomorrow,
Well, I know that, but will you meet after the 15th before deliberative?
31st.
After the hearing.
31st,
So
and we
they
got
can,
it.
We're going to ask for the recommendation.
I'm sorry, what day the week is until the session? I have no idea.
Yeah, it'll basically be a rework of things that we've done in the past. We'll just be able to be more specific, because we'll be able to tailor now that we know who the potential vendor is. So we can make that happen.
That'll then bring us on to principal reports. We'll start with GMS. Mr. Thompson.
All right. Thank you. At the December meeting, I was reminded that we want to talk about something other than all of that stuff that we report, and I'm going to do that. So as I reflected on the month of December, I thought, what did we do that was really different? And we spent our entire faculty meeting and then the in-service day on December 10th looking at another piece of the Smarter Balanced Assessment, which obviously is a big, not only district, but state and national initiative at this point. And our staff, as much work as they have done, and they have done a lot of work, over the last couple years, it was pretty eye-opening, especially for teachers other than grade 3 and 4 who are really more closely involved with it. Grades K through 2 aren't doing the testing. It was really eye-opening to look at some of the sample items, the performance task part of the Smarter Balanced testing. We've talked a lot at the board meetings about cognitive rigor and what that means, and about the new curriculum documents that we've developed in Litchfield, trying to ramp up what we expect students to know and be able to do. But I thought it would be really instructive and hopefully therefore helpful for the board to actually see the big shift that's occurring at grade 4. So this is a small sample that I hope will lead to deeper understanding of that. I'd like to begin with bringing your attention to this chart that says Hess's Cognitive Rigor Matrix and Curricular Examples. And this is the combination of two different scales about learning and teaching. One is Bloom's taxonomy, which is familiar, and that is in the first column, you see the 6 levels, and we could describe that as really cognitive complexity or thinking complexity. As you move down, they become more and more complex. And then across the top is the depth of knowledge, which we might describe as process complexity. So the things you're asked to do with the learning that you have begin at a very simple level, but as you move further to the right, then they become much more complex. You have to deal with multiple sources of information or use them in different ways that require a lot more steps or a lot more kind of creative thinking around what you're presented with. So that's maybe an important framework to keep in mind. And the argument would go that if we're really increasing rigor, we're moving further to the right and lower to the bottom of the chart in the things we're asking students to learn and be able to do. And I think that the samples we will look at will demonstrate that that is in fact very much what is happening. So with that, I shared a copy of the New England Common Assessment Program. This is a released item from the 2013 Grade 4 reading. This is publicly available, so there's no problem with us having it here. It's not protected, it's released. But anyone can see this on the Department of Ed website under NECAP, and if you go to 2013, you can see released items. The way it's presented on this page is very similar to what a student would see, where it's a full-page format. You'll see lots of multiple choices where they just bubble in the answer. And in this section, you'll see questions like number 1, the opposite of the word gain is, and then there are 4 choices, they choose one. So the writing part of it and the reading comprehension part of it is based on this excerpt or this reproduction of the story Running Shoes by Frederick Lipp. And then from that, on pages 4 through the end, there are questions, many of which have to do with facts about the story. But if we read some of them, what you'll see is they really only have to do with this story, and it's really basically remembering what you just read. If you forget, you flip back a couple pages. A student can do that. In fact, they're encouraged. They can use underlining. They can use highlighters. I guess highlighters not if they bleed through, but they can mark up their test. And they can remember the things and hunt and seek the answers that they need. So, for example, this is question number 4, how does the number man know Sophie wants running shoes? It's really a multiple choice, and there's one right answer. That's also significant because with Smarter Balanced, there's often more than one right answer. In fact, usually there's more than one. And then if you flip to the very end of that, page 7, here is where the students do their writing. And the writing prompt says, explain Sophie's secret wish. So that's recalling what happened in the story. And again, if they don't know, they can look back. And then they can explain what happened. And then what happens when it comes true using details from the story. All of that is at a fairly low level, and we'll get to a description of that in just a moment. Now what I'd like to do is have you take a look at another grade 4 writing task. This is from Smarter Balanced. And if you wouldn't mind taking the lens off that projector, for those who don't have it quickly available. This is what, on the screen, what the students actually will see. So the students have a split screen, as we've described, and here we have their directions. So the directions themselves go on for perhaps 5 or 6 paragraphs. It includes research questions. and it tells you how to use some of the functions. They can take notes on the computer. So if they remember Sophie, that's the wrong story. Animals, they can type in things that they want. I'll just put in none. I don't know where that came from. But they can type in a note. They can save it for later. They can zoom in and out. They can also make it a full screen format if they would rather read it that way, but then they don't see what's coming up. In the instructions, it tells them actually to read the questions before they read the source materials. They can also take notes on paper. So there's directions that they have to read, and then they tell you sources for the performance task. By comparison, that short story that we saw in the other, the kneecap test, here are the sources that they have to read in order to solve this task, or to complete this task. First, there's an article, it's a cold, hot, dry, dark, cruel world. And the focus of this article is how animals survive in different environments. That's not, however, the consistent topic of all of the other articles. So the students will be reading down through. They can stop and take notes along the way. They can highlight some things. There are pictures occasionally, and it cites sources for the information. After they read that article, they don't answer questions about it. They go on and read the second article. The second article is Animal Architects, and this is about animals that build their own homes. So it's really a different topic than the first one about how animals survive in their environment. And that goes on for any number of paragraphs. I'm not giving you time to read, so don't panic. You would have time if you were actually taking the test. And then there's a third source, so it's not one or two, it's three. So this is an article about the interrelationships between plants and animals within a single ecosystem, a somewhat related topic, but not the same topic. So students read this and take notes, and then we begin the questions. Now, if you recall in the story about Sophie, there was one written response. The first question immediately jumps off the page, if you will, on the cognitive rigor scale, because it involves two different sources. So the question number one, source one, and this is what I sent this evening. I didn't have this in paper format, but I did obtain it. It says, source one, this is the question. Source one discusses what some animals do to survive in their environment. The question is, explain how the information in source two adds to the reader's understanding of what some animals do to survive in their environment, and you have to support that with details. Now, already, what we're looking at is the relationship between texts. That's a much different task than recalling what the story said and kind of putting that out there, and just recalling, if you will, what you read. Question two is asking the students to evaluate and analyze which source of the three would most likely be the most helpful in understanding how animals and plants work and live together to allow the place where they live to continue to grow. That's a complex thought. So you have to really think about that. Explain why that source is most likely, and this is again an analyzing text, and use two details from the source to support your explanation. And then the next thing is a somewhat different task. It is a multiple choice, but please note that the second part. Click on the boxes to match each source with the idea or ideas that it supports. Some ideas may have more than one source selected, so there will be overlap in the text. Now students are going to have to connect each of the three texts in different ways. When they finished all that, and I do have to add something, it won't let me go on unless I do. If you try this at home, you can just type in some letters if you just want to see it. As long as there's something there, it'll allow you to go on. And when you've done that, then you have to hit next, and you can go to the next thing. You have a chance to check it. Once a student leaves this section, they won't be able to go on. So if you hit next again, they won't be able to go back. And then the next day, when the students come back for part 2 of the writing task, they have to use all of the information that they read the day before, and then they have to do a completely separate essay. And this is really far above what we are accustomed to. In part, all of the directions are over here, repeated, and all of the text that we read on day 1. But part 2 is to review the notes and sources, plan, draft, revise, and edit your writing, use your notes, and go back to the sources. Now read the assignment and the information about how your writing will be scored, then begin your work. And here's the scenario, your assignment. Your teacher wants each student to write an informational article that will be displayed with your science fair project. You decide to write about animals and where they live. Your article will be read by other students, teachers, and parents. That language is important because they're telling us what the audience is for the writing, and that is part of the grading standard. And it says, using more than one source, develop a main idea about animals and their surroundings. So this is a really wide open, really a research project within a wide parameter. And so the students have to first come up with what they're going to write about, and then they have to write, edit, and revise and save a final draft of their information article, giving citations about where their information came from. And when they're all done, and the other thing is, of course, they're doing all this on the computer. So when they're all done, then they will submit that. So I wanted to share that so you could actually see what it was looking like and what students will be seeing. And then I got thinking about it, and back to the place we all began, which was the cognitive rigor matrix. And I did a comparison, which is the side-by-side. So when you look at that, you can see some really big differences between the old expectations and the new. First, in the amount of reading, the type of reading, it's informational, scientific, nonfiction. There's 188 lines of reading that the students need to do on 3 different topics. They have to write 3 short essays instead of all of the multiple choice questions. And I think that most significantly on the back page of this are the ideas from Bloom's taxonomy and the DOK level. So in the old testing, what we were really measuring with students is their ability to remember what they read, to understand what they read and apply it, which is all in the upper left-hand corner of the cognitive rigor standards. Now, though, we're really moving to the far right-hand side, and they have to not only, the far bottom end of the scale, not only do they have to remember and understand, but they have to analyze, as you saw in some of the questions, they have to evaluate, and they have to create something totally new. So all of that is what is being measured by the new testing, and of course is also what is going into the new teaching, if you will, and the new learning by students. We're really trying to get there as quickly as we can. As far as depth of knowledge, the old test really showed recall and reproduction with some use of skills and concepts, but we really are moving into the higher 2 levels, which are strategic thinking and reasoning. And here are the descriptions, which I think you can now maybe understand in a different way. We have to write a multi-paragraph composition for specific purpose, focus, voice, tone, and audience. We have to revise a final draft for meaning, progression of ideas, or logic chain, apply concepts in a new context. And we have to use extended thinking, using multiple sources to elaborate on how concepts or ideas specifically draw from other content domains. So those articles, which were about animals and their environment, how animals build their homes, and the interrelationship between plants and animals within a biome, all of those are now used to create a new research piece by students. This is the kind of testing that we will be doing. I hope that was useful. I just wanted the board to have a chance to see it hands-on.
So I'm assuming the old kneecap, I'm guessing a machine graded it. This is going to have to be a person grading it, I'm assuming, because I mean, it's an essay.
I'm still awaiting, Julia told us we're getting our logins. My understanding is that a lot of it can be done by computer, and certainly the computer-assisted testing can, but I think some of this will be.
All of this, the ELA task is all hand-scored, and the math, which has 4 out of the 6 portions are more computational, that'll be machine scored, and the other, the open responses will be hand scored. And the Smarter Balanced Testing Consortia, and they are hiring multitudes of people who, over the summer, and many school districts down south get done at the end of May, so they'll begin then, and people from around the country will join them for June, July, and August to do the scoring, because their intent is for us to have those scores, if not at the end of August, in September. We'll see if they meet those deadlines. So they will have cadres of folks hand scoring these after they've trained them on the standards and such.
Kneecap was also hand-scored.
Oh, it was?
The writing part of it.
The writing part
Yeah.
was?
And some of the short
Right,
answers.
yeah.
But none of those short answers, other than the long write, were more than a little paragraph. So
This seems much more complex. This, I guess, this concerns me a little bit because it's so open to interpretation. When you have 4 different people look at the same test and probably get 4 different grades. I mean, is that fair to say?
No, I went to the scoring conference, and what happens is that there are bullet points, and they're not specific. They don't say they have to talk about this animal or that animal. What they say is they have to mention such and such an animal. It has to have these details in them, drawn from the sources, and they get points for each of those items. One of the things we talked to the teachers about was really encouraging the teachers to persevere. It's one of the mathematical practices, but here as well, because they can get points throughout this task, this process. And then each paper will be scored twice, and if there is not agreement, it continues to get scored by more people until they actually have a human conference and decide on a score that way.
I guess my concern was, not necessarily student to student, but more, well, even district to district, it's probably going to average out, but year to year, because we look at, obviously, at trends, our scores are going down, they're going up, but
Well,
if
we
there's
should have
inconsistent grading,
much more consistent scores than in the past, because the problem was that items were so different in the past that if the
hard
student
to
had
tell.
certain background knowledge, they had an advantage one year than another. And some students would have that knowledge if it was a science question one year, they might be, some student A would be strong in that, but student B wouldn't be, and another year it was about music and that kind of variation. Whereas here, it's not about the content, it's about the task. And one of the things I'll talk about is the activity that occurs before the kids ever do that, sort of gives the kids all a common frame of reference.
And there's both a science behind scoring this and also a methodology where someone who is very well qualified comes in and has to train and score and look at anchor papers and then actually qualify by virtue of demonstrating over a period of time and different levels of student performances, the ability to score it the way the experts would score it. And then, as Julie points out, if you get a disagreement, when it's multiple scored, then it goes to the next level above. If I could editorialize a little bit. First, the kneecap task was from an October grade 4 assessment. And this is from the Smarter Balance, which was assessed at the end of the year. So there's really pretty much a year's instruction between those. So, but even beyond that, it is more difficult. Kneecap, by the way, was one of the more difficult state-level assessments because it actually required students to write and not just bubble in sheets. So Kneecap for its time and for what we were expecting students to do, was actually very well regarded. The challenge is that we've traditionally looked at education in a way that says some kids are smart, some kids are not so smart, and kids get smarter and more educated by learning more stuff. And what we know now, and have known for several decades, is in fact, education does not just result in you knowing more, it changes the way you think. It literally makes you smarter. And, having students think in certain ways and read and compare and contrast and justify actually results in intellectual growth and the ability to hypothesize and justify. All of the things that we've been shifting slowly towards doesn't just produce kids who know more. It produces kids who can do more, who can think more. IQ scales are recalibrated every decade because each generation of students, believe it or not, scores significantly higher than the generation before, every 10 years. It's so much so that you have to recalibrate. And the major reason for that is that kids growing up now do an awful lot of hypothetical thinking. But they do a lot of it in non-school contexts. Gaming, coding, doing stuff on their own. They learn and grow intellectually in some of the things that they do outside school more than they do in school. And so we can look at this right now and say in 2014, this is pretty advanced stuff. But the research shows that given a different set of experiences, kids at grade 4 can be very successful with this. That also means that kids in grade 4 this year are going to struggle with this more than kids who are going to be coming along, who are in grade 1 now. So we have to set a realistic bar in terms of our results, but also understand that if we're going to develop students who are going to operate in grade 4 now, so we're talking about finishing college 14 years from now, 13 years from now. But you're looking at a different set of expectations about what it is that these students will do. And to some extent, and I don't want to beat up on the publishing industry, but we've spent a lot of time developing skills and doing consumable things that don't require the level of complexity that fosters that intellectual growth. And there's been a tug for the last decade back and forth about, so how do you proceed? And the Common Core curriculum and Smarter Balance basically take the tact that kids, we based on what we've seen in exemplary situations, given this sort of instruction, students can grow at this rate and accomplish these things at these ages. It's ambitious, and it's going to take time, but I think it's the right sorts of tasks. The world that these kids develop is going to be so much more complex than the world that I inherited when I left high school, that to be able to do only the things that were expected 20 years ago would make them ill-equipped for the world that they're going to live in. So, and I'll get off my soapbox now.
Thank you very much.
So when would they have been doing this type of work? Would this been more of a middle school type of project just a couple of years ago? Doing this, where you're reading different stories and trying to pull...
I would say typically, it's not unheard of at the elementary school, and certainly now that for 2 years we've been working on developing performance tasks, aside from the ones they will see here, where teachers are using things that have multiple sources, multiple steps, so it's more both cognitive complexity and process complexity. So kids are getting more accustomed to the idea. So it's not foreign to their thinking. I think what is going to be different, if they're doing a research project, which often they have done, at the end of grade 4, they have several weeks to complete the project. Here, they have several hours to take in all that information, to develop an idea, to write, and then edit. And that's what I think is, it's the compact nature of that experience that's really going to be different for them.
So I appreciate this. This is great information, and I know you're very busy, but can you do the same thing for us on math for your next time you're here in February?
I would be happy to. Good. I have something for February.
Those are the things, and of course, we encourage the other two schools, but,
Yeah.
but this is, I think this is very interesting to me, even though at times it seems, fourth grade, I'm going, wow, you know, but it lets us begin to see, and if the parents are watching, or they get the note minutes, or they begin to see some of the same information of how we're focusing different things, and we can see that same information as a school board. So I appreciate the time and effort that you took to put this together.
I'd be happy to do that. And all of these documents are available to anyone online at either the Department of Education or smarterbalance.org, so you can take a look at those, you know, while watching TV.
Right next to NCIS, right?
I would, yes. I would not suggest try to do the test while watching TV.
Are third graders going to take it too? Is that what the?
They are, yeah, but I chose grade 4 for this particular thing. But we actually looked at a grade 3 math task in December as well, so maybe we'll do grade 3 math next time, to see.
So, when we talked about the GMS computer lab, we talked about it as being necessary to develop the skills. Now that you see the split screen, the moving back and forth, the highlighting, the going in, they need to be able to use those skills in order to show the other stuff that they've already learned. The other thing is, and these are longer-term conversations, the learning environments that result, that we're trying to assess, probably look an awful lot like those assessment environments. And that becomes the big challenge. You know, you have somebody who's been in the profession for 20 years, who grade 4s look like this, and now you're really causing them to rethink and retool on the go, and that's the challenge. And people have really, I think, put a lot of thought into what they're doing and why. People have been very successful at what they've done and how they've done it, and that's one of the challenges of teaching, because as you change, you know what has worked for you in the past, and you have to take a leap of faith that what you're doing now will be more successful based on what it is that we're trying to achieve. And that the people side of education was what takes the work. Because especially someone who's been very successful at teaching whatever subject, it's sometimes hardest for them to let go because they've had such success at what they were doing in the past.
I think that, I mean, like what John was saying, how interesting it is for us to see it and for parents to, like, your perception of what the education experience is like is basically what you went through, and to some extent what your kids did. And people like me and others in this room, their kids were in school a while ago too. So it's, I mean, it is so much, I think, kind of a change management thing for teachers and parents and students and, you know, everything that goes with it. That's really it. Glad I'm not fourth grading.
We'd help you.
Third grade.
We would help you.
Third, even worse.
So, Dr. Cochran, I don't want to put Mr. Thompson on the spot.
I'll put you on it.
Well, I'm going to ask you first.
Do you know what normally occurs after somebody says that?
Well, as you know, the Budget Committee removed a fourth grade teacher. And I was wondering if Mr. Thompson could, if he wants to, he can say, no, I would understand that. If you would like to share how he believes that could impact next year's fourth grade class.
I'd be happy to. The difference between a grade 4, I had 2 more students enroll this week. I think that was this week, grades 2 and 4. And we have other students still who we believe are coming in. We have right around, it varies between 99 and 100 students in grade 4. So doing the simple math, it's the difference between a class of 20 and a class of 25, whether we have 4 or 5 teachers at the grade 4 level. And I will tell you that when you get beyond a certain critical mass, and I think that the board was wise in having numbers as our standard, which are lower than that. When you get beyond that, keeping up with the individual needs of all the students in the class becomes more and more complex. So, as you can see from the expectations shown in these assessments, students, it isn't simply a matter of giving students a piece of text, having them read it and get it. It's having them learn how to apply it in lots of interactions with others, in complex processes that you can't simply let them do all the time on their own. It has to be scaffolded, it has to be modeled, and they have to have a chance to explore it with support of a teacher. And when you get up to 25 students, that becomes increasingly more difficult.
I mean, there's another piece, you know, they say right now you have about 100 third graders who'll be moving into
Yes,
fourth
correct,
grade.
yeah.
So I don't think we had that number when they made the cut, so then maybe again, another thing to bring it back, because again, 25 is not the ideal number for that class.
The 3-year weighted average is impacted, takes the existing grade 3 enrollment and weights what's happened in the shift from grades 3 to 4 over the last 3 years. The most recent year times 3, the next and the one. And last year, as it happens, and usually there's not a pattern to it, it's relatively random, but we lost some students who moved out of district from 3 to 4. And so we had 98 students registered on October 1st, but because last year we had kids leave the district because families moved, they predicted an enrollment of 96. Well, okay, that was last year's 3 to 4, not this year. I mean, there are some patterns that are relatively stable. From grades 8 to 9, we tend to lose a handful of kids. That's there most years, and it becomes predictable. But from grade level to grade level, the other thing that happened is that, so we had 98 enrolled in grade 3, which predicted in the model 96, and then 2 weeks after we used the number 98, we got a 99th kid. The policy says 93, and now we're predicting, even at 99 kids, if we have 4 classes, we have 3 25s and a 24. Now, how many core academic classes of more than 25 do you think we have at the high school? 2 sections, that's it.
Jim? No, you said 4.
And they're both 26. And they're both 26.
I'm trying to think back. I think I've only been in 3 of the 5 fourth grade classrooms, but of those 3 that I've been in, it would be tight with 25 kids in there, I think. I think 20 is pretty full.
They are pretty full.
I wonder if it would be worth taking pictures of those classrooms, not with students in them, but with desks in them, as they are today with 20 in there, and bringing them to the budget committee tomorrow, just to show them.
If you were building a new elementary, there's probably only 2 or 3 classrooms in GMS that would meet the existing standards for a new school, in terms of square footage and other things. And one of them just got turned into a lab.
While we're on the subject of testing, can I also throw you guys under the bus? Not throw you under the bus, I'll put you on the spot. I think I sent you an email about it, but you might not have seen it yet or had a chance to reply to it. But since we have, I think, probably 4 people in the room that can answer it, I've been hearing grumblings lately about the NAEP testing. A lot of parents are frustrated because it's one more test their kids have to take, and it doesn't really mean anything for the district. We don't get district results. You don't get individual results. It's basically the nation's report card. So I'm just curious, is it something we have to do? Is it something we should do?
And Mr. Burke and I spoke about this morning. I said I would try to get a more definitive answer by this evening, and I've been flat out and apologize. But there is an RSA that indicates its districts and students must participate in the state assessment program. And the state assessment program includes whatever the state board indicates it is, and the state board indicates, I believe, NAEP is one of the required assessments.
I will tell you, they don't ask if we'd like to. They send us a letter that we've been chosen.
Yeah, we've been selected. We were on the list again.
Pulled out of the lottery again. Be part of the study.
It is curious to me. I feel like we are chosen, we are selected pretty frequently.
Every other year.
You know, for us, it's 8th grade.
for you, it's
It's fourth, yeah.
grade.
But that's
And
not
it's-
uncommon, and
yeah.
the reason is that they, from every state, they choose schools with different demographics and socioeconomic conditions.
Hmm.
So.
To round it out.
and That's why the same schools stay in the cohort.
We just fit that mold.
Yeah.
And it's not even every student in that grade level. So our 8th grade this year has to take it, but it's not the case that every
not every eighth
student
grade.
in that 8th grade is, right. Yep.
So do they identify the students that are supposed to take it?
Yeah.
They do.
You send them a roster with no names, unidentified information, and they pick. Some years it's every third student. In this
random.
case, it's nearly the whole grade.
It was 93 out of,
113.
right.
It's very odd.
And, yes.
Depends how many they need, and they decide.
And all we
send
do
the
is,
proctors.
all we find out is how our state fared against the other 49 states, is that
Right.
correct?
Yeah.
And we do pretty darn well.
So we help them out.
We help
Yeah,
their
it's all
numbers?
That's why they
What
keep
they-
picking us.
We have to fill out pretty complex surveys. I just had to fill mine out. I don't know if you got it yet, but, so they collect a lot of data about the school and the district, our perceptions, and also the teachers do. And I think that's part of the continuous, indicators at the federal level of what matters for school districts. I mean, they asked how many teachers were new who came back, things like that.
Is
So-
that, is it in the high school, is that the 11th grade? Is that, or is it just these two schools?
I think it's 4, 8, and 12 for NAEP. Georgie, do you recall?
It is
4, 8, 12?
4, 8, and 12.
I thought I'd ask.
There you go.
It is a concern, and
Well, you have NEWAs, and you have AIMSWeb, and you have Smarter Balance. It's a lot of tests.
and that's part of that's part of those strategic planning conversations about, okay, so what exactly is the function of each of these? What niche, what function do they perform? How do they do it? When do we assess? How do we get maximum use of the data? And those are the sorts of questions that I think really fall into that strategic planning. The board we should be able to justify to the board every time we're taking time away from instruction.
Anything else from Mr. Thompson? No. Thank you very much.
Can I just say one thing that's not about assessment? Channel 9 has the 50th best schools, elementary schools in New Hampshire, and everyone, of course, was flipping through, giving all those hits to Channel 9, and Griffin came in at number 28. I don't know how scientific the criteria are, but we were...
We'll take it.
We were, yeah, that's right. We were glad to be there. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Campbell was 44 out of all the high schools.
No. That was a few weeks ago.
Okay.
Really low.
It's low. 24? Okay.
I have to look.
I think we were 23.
But I'm like,
We don't have us on there.
142.
I think we're number
That's
one.
better, that's better, yeah.
This little state one, I'm like,
Yeah, not a big
I
deal.
just want to hang on, so I.
How can you be 142 nationally, and only be 24 in state? That's what I want to know.
Well, it's because they do it on
State is
different
amazing.
criteria, and one of them was resources,
Yeah.
and, student spending, and
The state one is, it hits on Facebook.
Right.
How many votes can you get on likes on Facebook?
Yeah.
Yeah. This guy's up all night.
Like.
It's a company called niche.com. I did look it up. So,
All right, well, thank you very much. That'll bring us to LMS and Mr. Leckliner.
So before I start on the program stuff tonight, I just want to talk quickly about some of the stuff Scott just mentioned, Smarter Balance, in terms of the middle school. We being a 5 through 8 middle school, we assess every grade level, both in math and reading, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And to Derek's point, students are highly assessed at the middle school in the spring. So we are actually, I brought a schedule tonight, it was a draft schedule, and I don't have to hand this thing out, but just to give you an idea, because I've talked about it in previous reports, we are looking at starting our assessments in April, which means grades 5 and 6 will assess in April, grades 7 and 8 in May. For grade 8, have eighth graders, but eighth graders really are assessed heavily, so we're going to try to be strategic. We've got the schedule laid out, but in addition to the Smarter Balance, they have eighth grade science kneecap, which is continuing. Even though the other kneecap's going away, the science kneecap continues. So eighth graders will test science kneecap the first week. They'll go to Washington for a week to take a breath, and then come back for the Smarter Balance. So
Totally focused.
absolutely, we're going to be studying on the bus. We're doing the practice. We'll put them up on the screens on the bus.
You got a captive audience for
There
about
we
8
go.
or 9 hours.
There we go. Okay, so I'm going to focus on, I've mentioned a few things about grading over the past several months. And I think the good news when we talk about what we're going to talk about tonight with grading, but not only this topic tonight, but the good news when it comes to Scott's presentation, and we've done a similar exercise at the middle school back in December, where the staff actually went through the practice test, did exactly what you saw tonight, and then additionally did the performance task, so was able to see that. But I would hate to think that the only time students are seeing this level of assessment is on the Smarter Balance test in May. And so Scott mentioned the fact that, we've been talking about performance assessments, performance tasks for quite some time, at least a couple of years now. And, I feel like we've done a lot of work at the middle school, and I know that you were also part of that network. So, in terms of writing, which was discussed tonight, I feel like students are starting to really engage in more of these types of writing assignments on a regular basis. They're starting to see rubrics with those more rigorous DOK 3 and 4 expectations. And the focus of this presentation really is on, okay, now that this is an expectation day to day in the classroom over a school year, what does that do to what parents see in a report card, what students see in a report, and how does that change the look of that? Because traditionally at the middle school, and really across the country, a lot of schools for a long time have graded the same way a lot of us were graded when we were in school, A, B, C, D, F, a couple of comments, maybe a couple of comments on behavior, and that's pretty much what the parents get. And after you saw what you saw tonight, it's really not fair, but it's really not even accurate to, at the end of a quarter, say, okay, your student has a B. Because you're going to be left with a lot of questions around, okay, in one class, what does that mean compared to another class, and so forth. So one of the real focuses at the school this year, at the middle school internally in our staff meetings, and it is changing a lot of the practices in classrooms, is around that piece of reporting and communicating to students about their learning, and then communicating to parents around their learning. And right now, the component of what that will look like on a report card really will be dependent on the SIS system and how that will be coordinated with that system. But we anticipate very shortly, we will be able to come to you with a draft of what a standard-based report card will look like. So I just want to back up and go over what we're talking about when we talk about standard-based reporting. And the book that we're reading is called Grading Smarter, Not Harder. There's a million books out there on grading, on standard-based grading, on assessment. This one just happens to be a newer release from ASCD, which is one of the bigger professional development organizations nationally, and has been, the feedback has been real positive on it. It's written actually from a teacher's perspective, which is unique. A lot of times these books are written by either those who are out of the classroom, or maybe, even administrators have been out of the classroom a while, but really interesting from a teacher's perspective. So I just wanted to start with a quote, and this really focuses generally on what we're talking about when we talk about communicating student achievement. And it says, everyone who has a need to know about a student's performance in school certainly can be told that she or he is a nice student who tries hard. But they also have a right to know the specific level of her or his knowledge in a particular subject at a given point in time. And it's really the second part of that we are really focusing on. Being able to communicate the specific level of performance, of proficiency in a particular subject at a given point in time. So there is a shift in standard-based grading, what that looks like in a report, what that looks like and how it's communicated to students. There's a shift in what has traditionally been reported to that approach. And really, there's 4 core elements that we talk about. One is that when we give the feedback to the parent, to the student, we're really focusing on academic content. We're looking at learning outcomes. We're looking at specific learning goals. The good news is, right now, the focus in our district and the focus on our unit design process that we're working on right now, teachers are really focusing on learning targets, but they're really focusing on their content areas and what their units of study are what they're going to bring students to at the end of that unit of study. In other words, what is the takeaway going to be for the student? What is the learning that's going to be happening that they now can apply to different contexts and, similar to, again, what you saw tonight. So it really is a focus on academic content. Secondly, on learning targets. And so where do we want students to be at this point in time in the year? And really, when you look at it by grade level, there's a lot of students that come in different places and a lot of students that by the end of a term or the end of the year, they might be in slightly different places, because if a student's coming in at above grade level or even below grade level, the individual learning targets might look a little bit different for each of those students. So how is that going to be reported? Thirdly, assessing each learning target separately, so that we're not just, right now, you see a grade for your student in math and they get a B. But you don't know specifically what are those standards within 7th grade math or 7th grade ELA, and how is the student doing? Student may be stronger in one area than another, and what does that look like? And then providing multiple opportunities to meet the standard. So if the standard is relevant to, I'll just use an example from the sample down below, but adding like fractions, let's say. If they're only given one opportunity to show their knowledge in that at one point in time, it's really not an accurate measure of their knowledge or their learning. So not only do we want to use different types of assessments, we want to use different types of assessments over time so that we can really get an accurate picture of where that student's learning is. So bring it back to the book, just to give you an idea of what this book focuses on, because I'm going to talk about this over the course of the next 6 months. Again, we're talking about making sure that grades measure what students know without punishing them, or even, I would say, sometimes there's gravy points in there for students who are doing the right things, look the right way in the class, and sit straight and have everything organized, but are they really learning? For factors outside their control. So the grades really measure what the students know. Critically, there's another chapter, today's focus, and we did this at our staff meeting today. The book also focuses on homework, how this all impacts homework and grading of homework. It spends a whole chapter on unit plans, which is aligned to what we're working on currently, and then talks about some different grading practices. Retests, I know Campbell's been ahead of the curve on that for some time, but we've really been trying to implement more of those practices at the middle school as well. So what does this look like in a grade book, and how does it differ from what has traditionally been the layout of a grade book? So if you look at I know it's, you don't have the sheet, I apologize. Oh, did you all get one?
I didn't get one.
You didn't get one?
Thank you.
Did you just take one?
No, I thought I passed them that way.
They did.
That's all right.
Everybody
Here,
else
this one.
got
Okay.
You can
Maybe I took one and passed
you
it
can
back
have
that way.
15 copies, that's fine.
Same one.
It's really good stuff. Okay. So this looks better in color, but on the bottom left, I'll give you a second to take your glasses out. The traditional grade book versus a standard-based sample, and there's a lot of ways you can set up a standard grade book, but just to give you an idea of how it takes on different looks. So if you look at the left side, there's a list of students vertically, and then horizontally there's a list of different assignments. And so you see homework 1, homework 2, quiz 1, homework 3. And we'll just take that first column of homework 1. So the student Antonio, he gets a 70% on homework 1, and then on homework 2, a 78%, and then 70% on a quiz, and 75%, and he ends up with a C. The next student, you can see 76, 83, 76, 81, a B minus. Now, there's a couple of things you don't know here. One is the weighting of each assignment. So a homework assignment may not carry the same weight as an assessment like a quiz. But what you don't know is anything related to what that is assessing. So what is that homework assignment assessing? What is the quiz assessing? And how is the student's learning relevant to the learning target, the learning standard? As opposed to the right side, which would be a standard-based, just a sample grade book, you have the student, and now you have the learning target or the standard, adding like fractions, finding the slope of a line, finding the area of a triangle. And it's pretty common nowadays to see a 4-point scale where you have proficiency right in the middle. A student who's proficient is a 3, a student who is above proficiency is a 4, and then on the other side of that, a 2 would be a little below proficient, and then a 1 significantly below. So using more of a 4-point type scale, and then really focusing in on the learning standards, so adding like fractions, finding the slope of the line, and then how that student is doing on those specific targets. And again, we're not just looking at one assignment to determine their level of proficiency. So it's more than one. It may be some homework assignments, but some quizzes, but eventually performance tasks and performance assessments. So that's what we're working toward. On the back, this really gives you a layout, because you don't have the book, but it gives you, you got one of the originals.
Yeah.
Does everyone else have a back?
It's really complicated over
Okay.
there. Gary goes back to first grade.
On the back, you don't have the book, so this just gives you, this is just chapter 1. So chapter 1, and the focus of chapter 1 is a lot on the grading and the standard-based piece. So some of the essential questions that we went over today and that we've been talking about at our team meetings and will be continuing in our team leader meetings, our team leader meetings, is really focused on really 2 things. One is the grading practices. And before you can really talk about grading practices, it's really important that the learning standards and the outcomes are defined and that we are all on the same page with that. So the unit design work that we're doing now, and there are now state middle school competencies, it's really important that those are well established and communicated, and then those practices such as retakes, such as how does a 0 factor into an average, and should we be using a 0 or should we be requiring the student to get the work in and show us their learning, those conversations will happen after we've determined what those those competencies and those learning standards are. So today we had some conversations, and one of the focuses today really was on being able to tease out learning behaviors versus learning outcomes. And in the sample, the standard-based sample that you saw there, the focus really is on learning outcomes based on learning standards. If a student turns an assignment in late, if a student isn't trying, doesn't show a lot of effort in class, or maybe the student is not turning their work in at all, we certainly need to report that to the parent, and the student needs to get feedback on that, but that can dilute the achievement feedback that you as a parent, whether a student gets the work in on time or not is very important, but it may or may not have an impact on their achievement. Maybe they're not getting their work in because they already know the concept and they have a high level of knowledge in that area. So we want to be able to tease out behavior from academics and the academic standards. That's a summary of what we talked about. In terms of where we are as a school right now on this, there are some, I mentioned the grading practices. Some of these grading practices have been and are being tweaked around retakes and around, so some of that's already happening. But we are going to be looking at, as we complete this work this year, putting the competencies, the standards on the report card so that you can see how your child and a parent can see how their student is doing relative to the learning standards, and make that clear. And then also tease out those learning behaviors as well. So more to come, and as we go through the process and as this student information system rolls out, we anticipate that we'll be revamping our report card, and Julie's done a lot of work with the departments on competencies, developing competencies, and really honing in on those core learning standards.
How do the competencies fit with the standards? So like add like fractions, would that be associated to one competency and that?
Yeah, it would be,
that way?
yeah, it would be a grade level standard of competency, and typically a competency might be a little more
General,
verbose
right?
than that.
Yeah.
There might be a little more language to it than that, but in the end, that would be a good example.
Okay, so is this one-to-one with competencies then? Is it standard of competency, or could you have, is it like one-to-many? where
Competence,
competency has
typically
many
in a class, like a grade level math class, grade level 7, let's say grade 7 math class,
Yeah.
there would be, Julie, what, 5, 6 competencies?
More or less. Most of our subjects that we've drafted so far have between 6 and 8.
So-
Those are our K-12 competencies.
Yeah.
And they're the same for every grade. And then at each grade level, there are indicators that, what does that look like? For instance, it's one of the competencies in language arts is to write a narrative. Okay? There are 3 kinds of writing in our new curriculum. One of them is narrative writing. So K-12, student will write an effective narrative. But that looks very different at first grade, where we're lucky if some students write a sentence or a paragraph. Looks different in 4th, 8th, and 12th grade. And the curriculum specifies what that will look, what the indicators specify what that looks like and what the expectation is. And then in the units of study, the students create assessments that obviously test or assess whether students, or to what degree the students meet the standard for that grade level.
The other piece is, Scott presented the DOK levels, depth of knowledge levels, which we've spent a lot of time on. And the implied expectation is that the student will be required to demonstrate that level for these competencies. So it's not just a recall of information, though that may be the foundational step to get them to that higher level thinking. Ultimately, they're going to be they're going to be applying their knowledge at a high level, DOK 3 and 4. So
There are 2 big challenges that I think Tom's done a great job of outlining both of them. The 2 big challenges of moving towards standard-based grading are, 1, getting rid of the things that don't relate to academic performance. So my child has a B. That's great. Does that mean that he shows up on time and is a good student in class and everything's in on time and it's neat and the mechanics of grammar are great, but he's an okay student and he gets up to a B by extra credit? Or the kid is brilliant at this, but bored silly, only doing half the work, and doesn't pass it in, and is a pain in the butt in my class? And your B doesn't tell you either one of those. The other piece is the one that you've just alluded to. So what's the grain size that we're going to report out to and give kids and parents feedback about? Is it 250 standards in grade 4 math, which is so much minutia, they get lost and you don't have enough to actually see what they're doing well and not? Or, so that's one extreme, and the other extreme is this one grade that not only includes their overall performance for the whole grading period, but also attendance and attitude and all of these things thrown in. So it's so diluted that you don't really know what it means, except apparently they're doing something relatively well, or not so well. And that becomes the conversation.
We're going to identify specific learning targets and then provide multiple opportunities to meet standards. Are targets and standards the same thing, or are they different? Like, because you mentioned that different students might have different targets depending on where they came in to the grade, but ultimately they have to get the same standard, but they get there differently, or what's that relationship, I guess?
So for a content area like, I'll use 7th grade math again. A target would be, yeah, it's similar to a standard, so that there's a grade level expectation that they're in a certain area of math, so fractions, that they're gonna meet a specific measure, which is for grade 7. But once you know that the student has hit that target, then for that student, it's gonna have to be adjusted, so
Okay.
that's.
So it's adjusted up and not necessarily down?
Right.
Okay.
And where we have targets for each grade level, you're kind of looking at the next grade level, okay, where are they moving toward?
So this, based on what I heard, so once we pick a target, let's say a middle number, this is where a student needs to be. If a student is achieving that or above, and you're using the number process, you would try to move the expectations for that student higher. Well, you wouldn't go in the reverse. If the student was struggling, let's say they're getting 1s because they're struggling with whatever the process is.
Right.
The idea would be to get that student additional help or opportunities to retake a test or redo some learning, on their own or something like that. Now, the big thing that I always see with this is the fact that, you could have, again, we go to a class of 20 to 22 students or whatever, 15 students are breezing right through it, 5 are meh, 1 or 2 are struggling. What is the balance? I mean, is it something where if a student's going to retest, it's something that is easily done either through, a computer or something like that, or is it something where we have to be redirected during class time to take something that takes away then from the learning process that they're missing to have?
That's a great question, Mr. York. It really depends on, the teacher really needs to analyze the assessment and they know the student and say, okay, is this a true measure of where they are in their learning right now? Is this just an anomaly? They scored really low on this assessment and it just doesn't, I know they know more than they do. So in that case, the response is going to be different than if they need a little bit more intervention and things. We might have to bring a math tutor in and, so the level of intervention and how that retake happens, it may be as simple as they just had a bad day, so they need a retake. But more times than not, a teacher's going to look at it and say, okay, what do I need to do? What do I need to look at? Do they need some reteaching? Do they need, in that area, maybe even more serious intervention that would involve like a math tutor or somebody? So it really is a case-by-case analysis of why did that student underperform on that assessment.
And how do we continue to challenge the students who some things come very natural to them?
Yeah,
and so that they're not breezing through or bored or whatever.
Yeah, it really, when you look at the middle school, I've found this now for years, that when you look at the middle school, there's content areas like science and social studies. For a lot of the kids, unless they have an affinity for an area of science or social studies, a lot of those kids at the grade levels, like 7th grade social studies, for example, is ancient history. For a lot of those kids, the first time they've seen a lot of things about ancient Egypt, unless they have a real interest in it. So I don't find that in that type of setting, there's as much of a discrepancy. But in an area like math, where, there's been concepts sort of building, then there can be a little bit of a separation. Actually, I wanted to report what we're working on that acceleration model in math, because I think that's an area where it may just be one concept that they show a strength, but in another concept, they're a little below or maybe on grade level, so when you average it out, they're really where they should be. But then there are students who, if you look at their skills over a number of different areas, they need to be challenged in maybe an accelerated program, accelerated class. We have 7 students right now taking 8th grade geometry, taking geometry as 8th graders. So that's another option, but it really, again, it is case by case and looking at, is this, they just have a strength in a real specific concept in the discipline, or is it, we're seeing strengths all across the board and they really are, they're ready to take on that challenge.
Anything else from Mr. Leckliner?
Will this be something that we'll look to roll out at all the schools, or we're going to test market in LMS and
Well,
get the bugs out
We
before
we already do it, so I was just gonna say, I know the hard work from when we went to formatives and summatives about 5 years ago. In our teacher's plan book, I have all the notes that I remind them of the work, because it's really a change in thinking.
It is.
And philosophy and
Yep.
culture, and it's the work that he's doing right now. He's like, I remember saying to Bob when we were doing this work, it's like there's a blizzard out there, and we're supposed to have, a snow plow, and we have a shovel, and because it's really hard to make that change. And what I can say is, Campbell High School surely embraces it, and our teaching has never been better than it is right now. Okay.
All right, well, bring this to CHS, Ms. Rothaus.
I wanted to let you know, we are 24th, Jody looked it up.
Yeah, we're 24.
We're number 1, I just looked it up. I dare you to try to.
You're just being so humble over there.
Hey, I just found it. I'm excited. Yeah,
Still behind his
yeah.
face over
And we won for the volleyball
If he
tournament
comes
last
in
year,
one of those
too.
big sponge
That's
things
true.
with a finger up there.
It's coming up, Scott.
Yeah, that is true.
It's been a good year.
So a couple things
Nice.
before I get into my major report. On my report, I did want to recognize Griffin Kaman for his Christmas gift this year. He gave notebooks to needy students in Africa, and I just think it's really awesome when we have kids that, give something very special to other people. Also, if you look at the report, our PSAT testing came back, and our scores, if you look at critical reading, 49.5, the national average is 47.4. Math, this was a big one for us, 50.4, national average is 48.6. Writing, 46.6. Again, the national average is 45.9, so we always do the happy dance when we're beating the national average. So I was going to spend some time tonight talking about the League of Innovative Schools, their site visit, and where we need to go with the League of Innovative Schools. As a teaching team, we did a self-study. There were 20 indicators. There were a couple places that our teachers felt that we need to address. One of those we're going to address tomorrow in our leadership team, and that's learning communities, professional learning communities, and finding more time for our teachers to be able to collaborate and work together. Another place that our teachers found that we were maybe had a weakness was in transitions. And we know that students coming from the 8th grade, so this is why it's really great that Tom's working on this grading practice that's going to be very similar to the high school. The letter that I sent to the League of Innovative Schools, we're now looking at a rollout date because we're not ready for the handheld devices, policy-wise and with the budget. So, but I will read our opening letter. So Campbell High School is expressing commitment to full participation in the comprehensive coaching and support leading to the launch as a personal learning site in September 2016. Our school is fully committed to this initiative work in collaboration with the Great Schools Partnership, coaching, implementing best practices with our students. Our school board and our superintendent are aware of this commitment to 21st century initiatives and give us their full support. Campbell High School began our relationship with the League of Innovative Schools in 2010 when our first team met in the lower level of Spalding Hall in Concord. It was the beginning of a mission and vision that sparked our imagination and inner desire to improve public education. For years, teachers and administrators have experienced the new one single idea, the newest strategy, the repackaging of old ideas, the deflation of teacher trust and morale in the professional development area. Experienced teachers were teaching when a report came out of A Nation at Risk. Doors were open for public school bashing, teachers were feeling ashamed and helpless. The atmosphere was harsh, with criticism and expectations for only high test scores, the new federal initiative, No Child Left Behind, which on paper looks great in theory, school districts again were asked to do more with less. Unfunded mandates became the norm. Schools were in a transitional period, and proactive schools knew that change was evident and mandatory to produce 21st century students prepared to be learned for college and career. Most schools felt that they were working in isolation with only a little guidance from underfunded state boards of education. Campbell High School opened in 2000 with a different approach to learning. Due to public pressure to conform to traditional ideas, Campbell High School was forced to assess, reassess, and examine, and make some changes. When Bob Manso and I came to Campbell High School in the fall of 2007, we had some good bones, we had some good teachers clinging to the ideas of its founders. The League of Innovative Schools gave us back our hope and identity. We are proud to be a member of the League of Innovative Schools. We believe in personalized education. We believe that all students can learn at high levels, and we're committed to those outcomes. Part of the League of Innovative Schools also takes us into the NEAS because we are working towards accreditation. So Michelle did send you the PowerPoint from my meeting yesterday with our faculty. And if you look, you can see the NEAS cycle. And what we spent our time on yesterday as a faculty is looking at teachers' instructional practices and examining those practices, how they align with our core values, our 21st century learning expectations, and indicator 2 was where teachers' instructional practices support the achievement of schools' 21st century learning by personalized instruction, engaging students in cross-disciplinary learning, engaging students in active and self-directed learners, emphasizing problem-solving, higher order thinking, inquiry, applying knowledge skills, engaging students in self-assessment and technology. We learned a lot yesterday in that faculty meeting because mostly our faculty is really proud of the work that we're doing, but they come back time and time again saying, we would like more time to do some of this critical work. And so the good news about the accreditation self-study process is we still have time to look at where we are and where we need to go before this team of educators from New England come in and give us a report. And we know right now that we're doing some things really well, but we do need more time to complete some of those tasks. Any questions?
What's the importance of
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you look, I tried to put that in the, it says about the process, if you look on slide number 8. But it's an accountability system, and it is really important because you need to be accredited. And so that accreditation process says that your school is meeting the expectations set out by the NEAS gurus, and so they come in. We will spend a lot of time in self-study. Our teachers will take an honest look at the things that we're doing really well. But they'll also take an honest look at things that we can improve. The last time we were accredited in 2007, they gave us tasks to do to improve. So the team comes back and says, these are things that you must do in the next 2 years or the next 5 years to keep your accreditation. So it's a self-study, but then a team of educators come in and they really bring a microscope into your high school, and they also make a lot of, they do a lot of interviews, and they spend a lot of time with people, and then they give you a report, and they highlight, a lot of warm feedback, and they give you cool feedback on things that you can do.
Is it for us to improve ourselves, or do colleges look at it? Does the state look at it?
Well, you have to be accredited,
Okay.
To be accredited high school, that's
Okay.
important.
So colleges,
For kids to go to college.
yeah.
And colleges have to be accredited.
Yeah.
So NEAS is for college, high schools and colleges.
Actually, there's one college that isn't accredited by anybody, but people tend to want to go there. It's called Harvard.
Yeah.
They feel they don't need it.
Accredited by themselves.
That'd be nice. So that's the work that we're doing right now. Tomorrow, we will, the leadership team will be looking at the feedback that we got in the faculty meeting yesterday on, you know, personalized education, where are we at, where are the roadblocks right now, because we'd like to try to, you know, get as many things fixed as we can before the accreditation actually happens. 2016 will be a year of writing. This year, the accreditation co-chairs, Aaron Brown and Heidi Paris, were designing and updating all our school-wide rubrics, and we can have copies of them that we use them. It's really great when the League of Innovative Schools, people came and they visited classrooms and they spent time asking our students. They asked a lot about assessment, reading, and our students, you know, I was really pleased to hear that our teachers are all using, you know, the same kind of assessments.
So is one-on-one teaching, is that more based on our technology? Is that what that's based on?
Which
The
in the
one-on-one, yeah.
Is that because we don't have devices, or we're?
Yeah, we need devices. So they really would like us to see us.
When they say devices, are they talking, can it be personal device that they have, or is it devices that they're looking for each student to have? I mean, I don't understand what that means.
They're talking about one-to-one computing.
So a student has
Everybody has an iPad.
everybody has an iPad or a Google Pad or something like that.
Chrome, yeah, one of those. And that's something that we have to work, you know, grants, whatever. You know, a lot of school districts have moved in that direction. You know, we'd like to try to move with the freshman class, maybe, have a buyout program. So we're not there yet. That would be our, and then there is money attached, but you have to come up with it first. So they, you know, that's the hardship. There's, you know, money, but they want you to be committed first.
So, I don't mean to be difficult here,
No,
but
that's fine.
if that was an important process in your budget, an important process, and you did your budget, you didn't include that in your budget for freshmen tablets.
Yeah, we weren't ready for that, so we were asking the league to give us more time. They, when they came to do the visit, they did meet with the superintendent, and we know that that's something that we'd like to move towards. So we were hoping to maybe do bring your own for the first year, bring your own devices.
So, just so I can I'm just trying to get a better idea. So, if are we not ready in the sense that we're not ready because our backbone system in the high school can't support a freshman class or 3 or 4 classes having their own device, or is it that the teaching process is not advanced enough to be able to be one-on-one because it's not ready to be uploaded and taught through one-on-one computing?
Let me give you my take on it, and then perhaps Principal Rothhaus could comment as well. I think we've made tremendous strides in the backbone piece. We've got 100 megabytes a second, or sorry, 100 gig a second up here. So it's as good a pipeline as you're going to get at most universities. We may have some issues with node density and the ability to service if we had all of the students here. That's one of the easier problems to fix if you have the bandwidth. In terms of teacher expertise, we're actually in a really good shape. We have a lot of people who are very solid and have been using technology for a considerable amount of time and are very good at using that technology in ways that engages students in their own learning. Mr. Cooper is one, Mr. Ballou, several others on staff. I think we're very fortunate. We haven't, as a district, really supported it as much as we might have, but we have to a certain extent, and a lot of it has been teacher-driven based on their own professional development. And, you know, so from that perspective, We have a lot of leadership ability. To bring this to scale will take some work. But in terms of the methodology, we have a lot of strengths there to build on. The main issue is the jump to the funding upfront of one-to-one technology for the students. The price point is dropping.
So let's take money out of the equation, okay? If somebody walked through that door and handed us 125 Apple iPads for a freshman class, can we start tomorrow? So the only thing standing in the way are the devices?
That's a big part of it for us to, and part of the strategic plan really was to look at the overall, system and get that passed first. You know what I mean? We didn't want to have too many competing in the technology budget, too many. But if someone gave us that kind of money, yeah.
Well,
that would be great.
again, I'm back to the same thing. If everything is a go, the board has always supported that process.
Yes and no. In the plan, what we said was this year, we would try to get pilot classes at the freshman level.
Have we done that?
We have to see where we are with what the platform is going to be. If we don't get a new SIS, then we would have to support that implementation using Google Docs. Unfortunately, we have some teachers who teach freshman classes who are familiar with Google Classroom and Google Docs.
Well, Google
So-
Docs can't be too bad, because Pinkerton just moved their whole school to it, so
it
I
is.
can't believe it's gonna be
I think
a bad thing.
even if we get the new LMS, I think we'll actually end up supporting both platforms, both Google and the learning management system. But the bring your own device policy, we have a draft ready to go that would allow it from that piece, so that's really a non-factor. The infrastructure, we have more than enough infrastructure to support a pilot with freshman classes only. But in order to, you can't just flip a switch and have teachers start teaching in September. They leave here in June, with no technology and students not having technology, and flip a switch and have it go out the box the next day or the next year. It is a capacity building process.
No offense, but Lori says it's ready to go that way.
Well,
not to put you on the spot, but you're saying that if you had the devices, you could flip the switch. I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot. I'm trying to get an idea of whether or not we can
Well-
flip the switch or not flip the switch.
Well, like, for example, Trinity High School, every student has an iPad. Every student has an iPad.
I understand that.
They're able to do that. and I
But
think they rolled
but
it
their
out.
backbone and their curriculum and the teacher's ability to teach their classes, because they have that, are we ready to go that way? I mean, if we're not ready to go in the classroom that way, then it's not a device issue.
Yeah, no, I think our teachers would say
It's
yes.
The original plan that we proposed to the board was that we would pilot with freshman teachers next year. It would give them a year to build up that capacity, and then we could implement a full-blown one-to-one in the freshmen in 16, 17. And so we would move that progression through. And so a year from September, which is what we're looking at in the next gen grant, we would be able to go full laptop, all incoming freshmen.
So if this board, sometime in January, in the next month, elected to remove from the high school the no electronics policy, meaning students can bring in their laptops, they can bring in their iPads, they can, whatever they need to be able to do education, could certain classes in this school function in that educational environment?
Yes and no.
Nate would say
We could
yes.
start it next year by, if you're.
Well, that's, I'm saying, why wait? I mean, why?
Well, here's
I
the
mean,
thing.
Why wait if we
If
can, all
half
it
the
takes
kids
is
have the
moving a policy?
technology and half don't, it doesn't work, because as a teacher, you have to go across both. So that's why, if we're able to do it, if we implement the bring your own device policy, the plan would be to set specifications and say, if you want to be in the technology section or sections of the class, then you need a device with these sorts of capabilities. It can be device agnostic, and Director Callanan would modify the registration process so that students would all register for this course, would either tick a box and say, yes, I have the technology and I would like to be scheduled in a technology-enriched section or not. And we could start that in September.
Okay, then
For freshmen only.
Okay, then whatever you guys need the board to do to unleash your ability, you need to put in our hands in the next 2 meetings so that we can undo that. Because if you're going to be signing kids up for class, you don't want us to wait till June to say, okay, unleash the hounds, or in this
I
case,
think we've already
unleash
approved it, though. You've already given us your plan.
But we haven't
We've already
changed our
said-
policy to allow
That's-
individual technology to come in.
But that's 2 meetings between now and,
Well-
for 2 readings.
I understand it is, but you're saying that the teachers need to know in advance. If we don't do it now and move that process so that they can begin moving whatever their curriculum is they need to teach, and at the same time, if there's other classes, even if it's outside of the freshman scope, of which we have skilled educators, and they believe that they can offer a similar thing in 1 or 2 other classes, then why limit it to the freshmen? I mean, I understand the idea is that we want to put these in the freshmen, and as they move through, that's where we want to start, but we need to start.
Well, in order to do one-to-one computing, every kid has to have a computer.
I don't believe
So you have-
not having a computer is a problem in Litchfield.
I know.
I mean, we'll find out, and then if it is, then
Now,
that's something
the high
that we
school-
can
as-
address.
As part of this process, the high school did a survey, and what was your estimate of the number of students that had access at this point to a mobile device or laptop?
There was about 25% that did
I was
not.
gonna say 78% did, so it's
Mhm.
like.
Not including phones, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
I mean, you really can't learn on a phone.
And we do have kids able to use phones in some classes now, just.
But in terms of participating
You
in
can learn everything
one-to-one
else on the phone.
computing, you would need a laptop.
Removed all their phones. You know, New York, one of the largest school districts in the country, they totally removed the ban on on phones and whatever, and they're doing each school is assessing their needs of how they're going to use these devices. It's not going to be this is the policy from a school board, it's going to be a policy that the principal and the administrators are going to design and lay out in each school, so it can be different from school to school.
We have been taking steps in this. We had several teachers from the high school go to Burlington High School for their one-on-one computing day. We've asked one of the humanities pairs who teaches the most sections of freshmen, Mr. Cooper and Mr. Keefe, piloted technology for us last year to look at compatibility. We built $15,000 into the budget that's still in the budget to provide everyone who could conceivably be teaching freshmen, who could be teaching freshmen this year would have suitable technology for all of those teachers. So we are taking the steps to follow the plan that we outlined to the board a year and a half ago.
And I said it a year and a half ago that we needed to move faster. And a year and a half, I don't know if we're any closer, maybe the backbone is stronger. But we need to move. Whatever obstacles are in the way from starting this in September, you should bring to the school board and let us help remove those obstacles or make decisions that help that process along. So that when we have conversations, as Lori talks to the interleague school or the people that are coming to accredit it, they can say, the obstacles are out of the way, we'll be doing one-on-one learning in September instead of, we hope to have it done and ready up by 2016. We don't, you know, if we don't start in September, now we're 2 years down the road from when we said, let's do it. Now, I understand back then, if we really had an infrastructure problem, that would have caused a lot of issues, but I think that that's been solved. And
So our blood drive's tomorrow. It says XX because I didn't have a date when I turned this in. And Jody was just going to tell you about college acceptance rates.
Yeah, just a couple of points. At this time, 80% of the class of 2015 has applied to college, which is a nice number. The students who haven't applied have indicated that they're looking at the military or looking at work, there seems to be a little bit more of a trend, or been taking classes randomly because of financial constraints. So that's a good number. Out of the 80%, we have 50 students who've already received acceptances. So again, that's a really pretty nice number there too. Just in where the guidance department is at this point, we're not even at a crossroads, we're at a four-way stop and go, because we're trying to close out semester one with only 7 days of classes left in semester one. And then we'll be going into our grading crunch up in our office while launching semester two, working on program of studies edits, trying to prepare materials for course selection, and working out some of the kinks of smarter balance. So we have dates flying left and right from now to the end of June for deadline. So busy trying to end one semester, begin another semester, and think about 2015-16. So it's a busy time of year like everybody else. Moving forward, so that's the important part.
Is there any update on your visitation to Pinkerton for the extended learning program?
For the Career and Tech Ed program, actually on the 21st of January, Lori and I will come in and re-present, because I know Ms. Prindle wasn't here to hear the first time, and the presentation about moving from the Alburn-Nashua model to an Alburn-Pinkerton model. So I'm just going to tighten up the information that I gave to you a month ago or so, and be able to just re-bullet that, make it a little bit more succinct, and so we'll be doing that on the 21st. And I don't think you guys will need it.
Anything else for high school? No. Thank you very much. That'll bring us to curriculum and Ms. Eon.
Okay. I'm going to move that way, but are you going to present the consent agenda first?
Do you need that projector? Well, I don't want this.
Derek, were you part of all these?
I missed the last meeting, which was, I think, the social studies one is the only one I wasn't part of. Last time I presented, there was questions on the AP stats. Look back at my notes. I believe the question was,
Well, how many credits? And that's one of them.
I think someone also asked too, why it wasn't a non-AP stat class. So I believe there used to be non-AP stats.
Regular statistics
Yeah.
course. We felt that it didn't meet the level of rigor that we would be looking for. Instead, what we added were two courses, the college prep math, and then the dual enrollment with community colleges called TAKE, or Topics in Applied College Math. We didn't have the capacity to do all of it.
Now, 10 marks, actually, Mr. Thompson can probably speak to that the best, the 10 marks program.
Yes. Do you want me to talk about that?
Yeah, because it's grade 3 and 4th math support, right?
We had budgeted for math software at the elementary school, and I was familiar with something called Alex Math, which has, basically it covers all of the component areas of math instruction. The things that we have for free at the elementary school, there's quite a few that are available, but we use Extra Math and Fast Math. They basically are about math computation, but the other more sophisticated and for fee-based programs, if you buy the whole product or a subscription, it covers algebraic concepts and geometric kind of things. And in addition to the facts, they have tutorials. Most of the programs, including 10 marks, will give a teacher the ability to allow students to see a grade ahead, so that if students are really thriving in math, they'll have an opportunity to work on concepts that are above their grade level. And we saw this as a positive way of helping, especially third and fourth graders, get ready for the potential for math acceleration at the middle school. So if we can give them a little head start on that, we thought that would be a good thing. 10 marks was adopted for use at the middle school, though I can't remember how broadly. Was it?
Yeah, we use it at the grade 7. The lab that we now dedicated to the grade 7 math program is, a large function of that lab is the 10 marks programs, going really well. So all the students use it in some form or fashion, some for acceleration, some for remediation.
And on the social studies one, is that 2 different classes?
It is. Each a half credit.
Yep.
I forgot on the 10 marks one. Would the students have home access just like they do with extra
Yes,
math?
they do,
Okay.
yeah.
So you're looking for a motion to accept AP Stats, Social Studies, proposed course in the 10 marks GMS? Smarter Born Performance Stats, that's just a PowerPoint for our review?
Correct.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to accept the curriculum consent items.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? 500.
Usually it connects immediately, who's my computer genius?
Nate?
Where's Mr. Martin when we need him? He had it all fired up.
Can you email it to me, Julie, and use my computer?
I love that music. Yeah, that was neat.
Well, I've got all these sites already.
Yeah, I didn't take it, that was already set up when I arrived, and then I
Hey,
just...
Michelle, I'm gonna agree with you, it's cold in here tonight.
It's freezing. It was like this last
Too
night.
late. It wasn't as cold last
This
night.
too is blowing
Cold air?
right on me.
So that ductwork needs to be cleaned.
You're not typing fast.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Burn
in my office.
Burn up those keys.
I bet if we get the ductwork cleaned, they'd be like blowing heat.
Stick it in there.
I believe it. Yeah, see, it was clean.
Little dust come flying out of there, you know?
Hands are free. Are your hands just as cold as mine?
Nah, my hands aren't that cold.
Oh,
No.
you're just as cold as I am.
That's not, my hands are always like
They're
that.
helping me out, so that. I have a blanket.
Cuddle.
Some sites I wanted to show you. I'm gonna go get it. Freezing. Works in my office.
It's all that bandwidth we have here.
This is not good after we just had that conversation.
Yeah.
Unless you can get to these sites.
Yeah, you can look at some STEM.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I can do that, except now I'm not plugged in.
No, I'll put you. Okay, so if you look at this packet, I'm gonna leave that for Scott. Smarter Balance Performance Tests. What I'm gonna do is talk a little bit about the background of what, the assessment that Scott showed you that was specific to fourth grade language arts. If you go to the second page, just explaining the performance task, let's back up. We've talked about this before, but it probably could use a little review. That this is what the students will face. They will face a multiple choice with a few short answers, one for language arts and one for math. And depending on the grade level, it could last anywhere from 1 to 1.5 hours, but students can also have extended time. And we're going to encourage kids to use pauses. They can put their head down for 2 minutes or 5 minutes or go to the restroom, as long as those pauses are less than 20 minutes. Does pose some logistical challenges because students will need extended time, but maybe not the whole group, so then that takes up space. And in schools where we want to back-to-back the schedules, that could be, one group of students from 8 to 10 and another group from 10:15 to 12:15. Some students may need that extra time. Then there is the performance task in both English language arts and math. The math one is one session of an hour and a half. The language arts one is 2 sessions, as Scott showed you. The first session, they initially read the pieces, either 2 or 3 pieces, depending on their grade level and the length of them, and answer 3 open-ended response questions and take notes. The next session, the next day, they will spend another hour and a half to write a multi-paragraph piece, and that's 3rd through 8th and 11th grade. They will have those articles, the original articles, in front of them also. They can use their notes, and frankly, in the first year, I'm encouraging us to, and it is allowed that kids can take handwritten paper notes. It's a little complex for them when they're reading and have questions. They would have to click on this box that then appears in their screen to take notes in, which requires keyboarding and more organization. So it probably will be to our benefit to have kids take handwritten notes. They get those back the next day, and then they get the directions for the actual piece. Sometimes it says, write a letter to your politician, or write a letter or an article for the newsletter. The assignment attempts to be real life. You hear that terminology, or authentic, a lot, both in the standards and in the assessment. And so that is the second of the language arts, referred to as the performance task. In between the multiple choice and the performance task for both math and language arts, there's this thing called the classroom activity, where the teacher actually gives a mini lesson that's scripted, that sets the stage for the performance task, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay? So here on this page, it explains that the performance task is an item designed to provide students with an opportunity to demonstrate their ability to apply their knowledge and higher order thinking skills to, keywords, analyze complex real-world scenarios. And this this packet we wrote as a committee when we were in California, and I've given a couple of presentations and edited to some extent, but it was really important that we add this second bullet, that students have the opportunity to show what they do know, not what they don't know. Multiple choice is typically right or wrong, it's what you don't know. In a performance task, it's what you do know, and that's why I mentioned earlier that students earn multiple points on these assessments, and perseverance is so important. On the next page, the role of the performance task is to provide measures of student achievement, growth, and progress toward college and career readiness. It involves significant interactions with stimulus materials and/or engage in real-world problem solution. Stimulus materials are those reading articles, or in the case of math, there are graphs and charts that I hope to be able to show. It integrates knowledge and skills across multiple content standards. And you were asking about targets. Typically, we use the word targets as learning targets. And those are individual skills or pieces of knowledge, like 3 causes of the Civil War, how to multiply fractions. Those are learning targets. Allow for multiple approaches and include multiple items that are hand-scored. Okay? So those are the key features of this so-called performance task. And it is the kind of thing we've been working on the last couple of years and trying to simulate in the classroom. And the more that we get to see these samples released by the Common Core Consortium and Smarter Balance, the better we will be at duplicating those. But the key for us is not so much to be master test designers. It really takes a tremendous amount of skill to do that, and obviously within the classroom environment, we are doing that. But we have just gotten access to New Hampshire purchased what is referred to as the digital library, where we will have lots of samples available to us to use with our students that have been written by professional assessment designers and have been validated by groups of professional scorers or scorers who have been highly trained. Okay, the rest of the packet is really informational for you. It's things we've talked about before, about how the items on these performance tests are tied to both the math and reading standards, and the kinds of higher order, as both Tom and Scott mentioned, higher order requirements for our students. If you go to the middle of the packet, sorry these aren't numbered because I was going to show you. I guess I should have numbered them. This one's called Math Performance Task Setup.
Page 17.
Thank you. So what is this task? This looks very different than a kid just logging on and going for it with the multiple choice. The classroom activity will take place the day or at some point before the actual task activity. The stimulus is the scenario that is embedded in the task. For math, there are 6 questions of varying types. Do we have one that we can put up here, Scott?
I'm not getting that page.
I can get it
Okay.
now. Okay. I was going to go to, what did I say?
This is the grade, the same one.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to go to math, grade 4. We were doing 4, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's look at Scott showed you the language arts item for grade 4. I'm going to show you the math item, thank you. Math item for grade 4. So there are 6 parts. This question is pretty computational. Tanya runs so many meters at one day and another. What's the total? Students need to know what the operation is. By the way, I should mention that these performance tasks are based on, supposedly, we're told, the previous year's standards. So for 4th grade, the math skills and the reading and analysis skills are end of 3rd grade. So it doesn't matter if some of our 4th graders take the test on March 17th and some take it on April 17th because we have a 5-week window. They're really based on the end of 3rd grade standards. Okay? So these may look a little simple in the beginning. So they get 1 point. It's only a computation problem. It's only worth 1 point. The next step is asking the students to make a relationship between these 2 values. Okay? Do students understand those? Again, these are in the basic category of numeration or understanding numbers, number values. Now we have fractions. Can they convert this fraction to its lowest form? Again, 1 point. Now we have a chart, similar to remember Scott showed you in one of those 3 questions, there was a chart and the students had to click, is this information in 1, 2, or 3 sources and so forth. Same thing holds true here. You're dealing with these figures, and the students are going to have to click on multiple responses for each of these shapes. So there's geometry involved. Now we get into where there's a word problem, there's a chart involved, students need to interpret that as well, and then there would be multiple answers that need to be chosen here. Now we've got some measurement.
Why do they provide a calculator?
I'm sorry?
Why do they provide the calculator?
Because you may only use a calculator in certain places. Oh, that wasn't a calculator.
Oh, wasn't?
It does
Okay.
pop up or become available only when you can use it, but
Okay.
this is actually, you just click on the numbers to make the
Oh, it's
equation.
answers.
Yeah, it's answers, it's not really a it does look like
Why
a
don't you just type
calculator.
it? They don't want you to type it?
And again, this is something, yes, and especially if you have to do the fraction down in the lower right-hand corner, and in other ones, it'll have plus signs, minus signs when you get into the upper grades where they have to write equations, greater than, less than. They will give you all of the numerals and the symbols that might be needed for the response.
You can use the numbers.
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
You can do both?
If you
Okay.
click into the box.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then this one was the word problem, where they have to do several things. In this case, drag and drop is one of the skills. There's another one, I'll just describe it to you, where there's this multi-sided shape, and the students have to drag 4 lines to change this shape into 4 sectors. And they're given certain directions about what those sectors have to look like and size and all of that. So the requirements can vary quite a bit. So those are the 6 parts of that problem, and here's the last part, I guess, multiplying fractions. So you can see how each portion of this task becomes increasingly difficult for the students. Okay? These questions, as it says in the handout, are independent. Some of the portions are dependent on one another, but others are independent, so they can get credit. And again, hopefully encouraging them to persevere and work through all the parts of the problem. The next page, 2 pages, describes the language arts performance task. And this is a little more challenging, as I said. Part 1 has the sources, they take notes, they answer 3 constructed response items, one of which might be a chart with checkboxes. And on number 4, part 2, the second day setting is multi-paragraph writing. And it can be any one of the 3 types of writing: explanatory, argument, or narrative. And they're encouraged to plan their writing before they get started, to revise and edit the work as well. For kids who like to be one and done, that's tough.
So what's the time they have on these assessments?
Anywhere from, depending on the grade, an hour to an hour and a half, and they're allowed extended time as well beyond that. It's untimed. It's technically an untimed test. Now, I wanted to just explain briefly what the activity looks like. Scott showed you the 4th grade Animal World readings. This is what happens in a separate session prior to that. Now, in these activities, and on the next page in the packet, it indicates that this is not scored, and that the whole point is to be engaging, to motivate the kids once they see the item, to introduce any vocabulary that might be tricky for the kids, to build background knowledge and create context, and basically to level the playing field and reduce bias. So if a student doesn't know about certain animals, they have some familiarity with that. There's a math question about pulse. Some kids have no idea what their pulse is, so you explain that. You have them put their fingers on their wrist and understand what pulse is. Now, that doesn't really affect the math, but it can be a distractor if kids don't understand that. So it's a really good relatively innovative element that's brought to this
So-
testing.
While they're being assessed, do they get to ask questions to the teacher or anything?
During this part, not during the actual task.
So how much time do they spend pre-assessing?
This activity is about 30 minutes, a minimum of 30
They do it the day before,
minutes.
the day of the assessment?
It's our choice,
They have to do it before they start the
yes.
performance
And if a
task.
student is,
Yeah.
yeah, if a student
That's
is
the requirement.
absent, they still have, I mean, the whole point is to do it before so that you're giving them this background knowledge. So in this particular activity, the goals are for students to understand that animal communication is important, animals have basic needs, and they have special features. Okay, so kids who haven't had pets may not understand the responsibility or how pets behave. This is going to be important for them to do the rest of their reading. So the teacher gets this script. Okay? Today, we're going to get ready for the Animal World Performance Test, which is about animals. Let's start by discussing what you know about what animals do to stay alive. You will have 2 minutes to discuss with your group. Got bigger. I know.
Does that sometimes.
It does, and it's because there's a thing here and here it is.
Yeah.
But it does it by itself, which I don't like. So embedded in this task, there's information, but there's also questions. So here's a discussion question. What do animals do to stay alive? So the teacher will write, or the kids will write on paper some different ideas. A lot of it is brainstorming. There's not a lot of right or wrong answers. It's to get kids to generate possible answers like hunt for food, look for water, that kind of thing. And then it goes on and goes into, I am a bee that dances near a flower. What am I telling other bees when I dance? So they go, where to find food, that kind of thing. So the teacher, depending on the grade level, is facilitating kids' thinking that's going to help them. Now, none of this information tells kids what to write when they get to do the writing. Instead, it gives them a comfort level so that when they read about animals, they don't freak and say, I don't know anything about animals, I don't know what they do, that kind of thing. Because it's not about that. It's about them reading and using the material that's in the 3 articles that they're given. And reading is not scored at all. What's scored is obviously the type of writing, the sentence structure, vocabulary, grammar, conventions, that kind of, although there isn't a heavy emphasis on those conventions. And equally strong number of points for what is called research/inquiry. So the kids don't go do outside research. Early in this process, there was a thought that they would have links and the kids would go out to other places, but then there were all these concerns about where kids would go and would the equipment work properly once you had to get out on the internet beyond the test. So instead, the inquiry that they're doing is all built into the articles that they're reading. Whether they're literary, like a poem or a story, there's still information there, plot, setting, whatever, or informational text where they're getting actual information. So that's what the kids will be experiencing. And this performance task is more different for them than the multiple choice that they see in some other settings. And what we want to do for this year anyway is primarily to develop a comfort level for students so they know what they're going to face in every part, be aware of it, know what their options are, for instance, in terms of breaks and that kind of thing. And then over the next year and 2, we're going to be able to spend more and more time as we as educators become more familiar with what the requirements are, that we can then create settings for students to become more proficient at answering the questions and doing the tasks. Okay. Thanks, Mark.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, Julie?
I'm all set.
Does anybody have any other questions for Julie? Right. Thank you very much. So, I think we can thank our administrators.
Yep.
And wish them safe travels, and stay warm.
Start my car.
The boss gave you an extra 2 hours sleeping time.
Yeah.
Quote, unquote.
And thank you for that.
All right, that'll bring us, tonight, that'll bring us to committee reports. First, the Budget Committee.
Let me ask her.
Well, tomorrow night will be our last evening with the Budget Committee as far as finalizing the acceptance of our budget. We'll be presenting, any additions or final cuts will be made by the Budget Committee tomorrow night. We'll also be presenting our warrant articles for their approval or acceptance.
Eric and I showed up in August after being requested by Mr. Messi. And I think we both stressed to our disappointment in the Budget Committee and their cuts on the transportation side. And again, I think in continuing to look at that, I mean, they cut the transportation budget in an idea of going to less buses. However, we have a contractual obligation to 10 buses, which means First Student's going to invoice us for 10 buses because that's what we agreed to.
Yep.
So I think it's very disingenuous, again, of the Budget Committee to remove costs from our budget in which we are contractually obligated to. Either because they don't have the will to cut other locations and they're trying to take an easy way out, or they're trying to, as I've heard, trying to create a budget which is below the default budget, which is not part of their responsibility. Their responsibility is to put forth a fair budget to the taxpayers after doing their due diligence. I think when they remove teachers and play with the school board's number of students per classroom, based on how they see it. If they want to change those numbers, they can run for school board in March. And removing dollars for something that we have contractually obligated for, they're not taking care of the town's money or the taxpayers.
And I can assure you there'll be a motion made by myself as far as to place those buses back into our budget, along with the fourth grade teachers, especially with the information that we received this evening from Mr. Thompson, that attendance is already grown from what it was before, and them cutting a teacher brings the class, already brought the class size larger than what the school board had already recommended. So,
And what about the math tutor?
I plan to bring that back up also.
I thought it was interesting that he mentioned when they don't meet the standards, they'll bring in a math tutor, and I was like, if you have one, it's not cut out of budget. But
Again, those items will be brought back, but the Budget Committee also has final say as far as any additional cuts that they'll be making tomorrow evening. And hopefully there aren't many.
Well, I would encourage our school board rep and administrations to strongly suggest to the Budget Committee that we will not accept bottom line cuts to our budget. And that, we will expect them to do their due diligence and provide the state of New Hampshire with a fully formed budget so that we can run our schools correctly after the voters decide.
Were there any other committees that met, aside from Park, that we already talked about?
Brian, any update on our building group? We sort of like died on the vine the last 3 months.
No. We've met with Mr. Lynch twice in the last couple of weeks, and he is working with 2 vendors for quotes on the maintenance and storage.
So why don't we, there's not gonna be anything for this warrant article season, because it's got rain. So why don't we let that process continue to work and look to get back together after the election in March. We'll, you know, I'll be around another year, so I'll head that committee up again in March, but maybe we can set up a meeting in March and work through the summer and in that process to have it better structured for the budget season and voting next year.
If it's going, if the, one of the options would be to pursue it with the use of impact fees, then that could happen.
Could happen sooner, it's correct, so. But, you know, you can, if you think we need to get together in February, busy month anyway, so, you know, that and school vacations and stuff, so. So, whatever, do we know whether we're, first or second in the, presentation next week? Should we find out where we're gonna be, if we're gonna be the first presentation for the budget committee? Second, well, I don't have to be there for 3 hours, 1.5 is enough.
Did you guys, speaking of your building committee, did you guys ever talk about bringing in a consultant to do the whole asset assessment so we can fill out School Dude correctly, or did that ever come up?
No, because we put that on Frank's list of things to do, and he was supposed to get us a price from.
It's on my list of things to do, Mr. York.
Because that might be good. That might be a good warrant article.
Well, you know, whether bottom line is, it's one of those things where when we get to June, just do it. If the money's there, we just contract it out and get it done.
We have looked at it.
Because we've fought this battle now for 4 years, and we're no closer to getting it done. We're never going to get it through the budget process, so I think it's one of those things where if there's any end of the year funds, even if it just gets it started, then you know, for 1 or 2 or 3 schools, whatever we can afford, that we should have that, you know, enough work on that so we can make a decision as we move into May and June.
But that way that we have facts though, so when we go to them and say we need 70,000 for their events, we have facts.
The School Dude is, I did look into it with Mr. Bennett, and we talked to the School Dude people a little bit. It's more data analysis. It's more plugging in information in that certain software piece of School Dude. Do all the, it's more aligned with the preventative maintenance. I think we talked about more and what we're looking for is someone to come in who structurally and can look at systems and say, boy, this thing is a mess, so you need to really stop.
Your boiler's can be gone in 5 years.
Exactly. You know, right now, we're limping at GMS again with the boiler. We just replaced a pump and we're kind of holding our breath on oil circulation there. So every day, we need somebody to come in. I mean, School Dude will do it, but it's more of a data analysis. We'll plug in energy.
We got to get electricity. The key was they were going to come in and get all the information and put it in there.
Right, based on your service manuals, based on. Right.
From
I
that,
think we're looking at
an
more, what is the condition of our systems today, and what should we be looking at over the next 5 years, what should we replace, and School Dude won't do that.
But it will do it in the sense that if you tell it you have a 15-year-old boiler that's make X, Y, Z and whatever, and these are the maintenance steps and repairs you've done on it, there's supposedly, their software will tell us that you should, they're metrics.
Right, exactly.
We'll say this, which is similar to what, you know, we're gonna do. Inevitably, maybe we have to do both, but we need to get the information into School Dude, and the, you know, my feeling was, if it's just a data entry process, and Frank, you would know it better than I, but if it's just data entry, we ought to be able to have the building facilitators, whoever manages a building, be able to begin the process of gathering whatever the necessary information is on each piece of equipment, and then we can, you know, get a part-timer in here, either over the summer or whatever, to just type in the information into School. I mean, you know,
I wish it would be that simple, but it's just, I hear what you're saying, it's just finding the time with our facility directors to compile all the data that you're looking for.
And it's not as simple as just bringing someone in. We could do it. I think it's a two-part. I think it's a two-prong. I think it's putting the data in there with school duty. And I think it's someone come in and can evaluate the current condition of the system. Again, I think we all know that the data that we're gonna put in for a lot of these systems, we said we far exceeded their life expectancy. So we really need to know, how much longer we can get out of certain things. Maybe we
What's
can
that?
have an idea of what that cost would be with somebody in the next month.
Frank, do you have an updated list of, a while ago you given us a list of each line item that the budget committee had cut? Do you have the latest list of that, or?
I think I sent that out today via an email to you. I'm sorry, I can't get into my SAU shared drive.
I think you gave us you gave us the total numbers, but before you given us like line items, like cut X from this, X from
Yeah,
this.
I do have that, but again, I'm gonna try rebooting, see if my SAU shared drive is gone. And I'm not sure why. So I'm gonna try rebooting, and if I get that, I have, it's actually the other half of what I sent you.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
There were no changes though from the last time I sent it out.
Oh, there haven't been any? Okay.
No, because the last cuts were the December the 19th, I believe, meeting, so there haven't been any cuts since then. But I'll send it out one more time. I'll send it out.
Yeah, the 18th, last ones.
Those are the last cuts.
Yeah. All right. That's going to bring us to warrant articles.
Yeah, these are the warrant articles that discussed and will be presented to the budget committee once the school board votes that they would like for those particular, certain ones that are not discretionary have to move forward, but there were a couple there that I think the board needs to make a decision and has to move forward with the warrant.
So are we voting on these this evening?
I believe we are required to give them, scheduled to give them to the budget committee tomorrow evening.
Correct.
Yep, so that they can present them as part of their.
So what do you have to,
They've also gone through legal review already, so we're all set.
so we vote before the budget committee votes on it,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Because you're voting to move that warrant on, you support it, take a
Okay.
vote. I think we actually record the vote of the school committee as to their.
Yes, we do.
And then we'll move those votes and those warrants to the budget committee.
Since the budget committee hasn't given us a budget, can't move Article 1.
That's why it's just got millions in it.
Oh, I think they're supposed to have had that budget to us by tonight, so we could vote.
I don't know
So
what
they
vote
could
is.
present it.
I'll vote. I don't need the final number.
I'll make a motion to accept Article 2 as written.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain. So it's recommended 500.
Make a motion to accept Article 3 as written.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain. 500.
Make a motion to accept Article 4 as written.
Second.
Conversation?
The thing I'll say about this one and the next one is the ability to explain what it means, this whole unreserved fund balance. I mean, I think we've talked about this so many times. Unless you're close to it, people see it as some additional increase. I mean, they don't really understand the mechanics of how it works. So, I know you can't change the wording on here.
No, we usually do an
but we do,
explanation
right. So
page,
that's,
so, yeah.
so it's just, that's fine.
And the key, it will have $0 impact on it, so.
Right.
Right.
And then you receive the argument is that it really does have a tax impact in the previous year because it was appropriated and the monies weren't spent. I wish I had an explanation that I could offer up because I've been doing that for 5 years now and to get the same response. But it's however one wants to spend it. It's just money that was appropriate not spent and we'll move it into it.
Similar to the town.
We have, how much do we have in it right now? 50,000? Because we replenished it last year.
I think it's 52.
So we just replenished it, right?
We put 50 in last year, correct.
I'm probably gonna vote against this one just because
we're asking for too many things.
I think we're asking too many things. I'd rather focus on the SIS administrator, the security stuff, and then maybe the playground. We've only used it once in the last 10 years, and I think once we have that study done, I think we'll be in a better position to ask for
Do you
money.
have a chance later on to remove them, a warrant article after tonight?
Maybe you
They're gonna remove
can,
them.
and before delivery.
Okay.
Before they're amended and delivered, yeah, before they go through delivery, you can remove.
We can decide to remove.
Any other conversation? All those in favor of Article 4? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Fails 2-3.
Make a motion to remove Article 4 from the warrants.
Second.
Any conversation? Based on,
I just think it's a good point.
We're not going to support it, we shouldn't pass it. Technically,
Fair ask.
it doesn't move forward. There's a negative recommendation.
I think one year we voted to put it on,
We
and
did.
voted to
I know.
support it.
I'm just going to vote that we remove it. If we don't have the
Make it
votes,
clean.
let's take it out.
and there's a second?
Second.
Would like to have been around and give that explanation.
All those in favor?
I think Steve was scratching his head.
Oh, the year you didn't approve the budget, yeah.
Yeah.
That was interesting.
Well, that's the warrant, is we voted
Right,
down
we
the
voted
budget.
down the
But we had to put it on the warrant.
I think we did it to a warrant article too, though, didn't we?
No, what was Article 1? And
Okay,
the
I thought it
board
was
didn't
okay,
support
I
the
thought it was a
budget.
separate one too.
I said no.
Article 5,
The new Article 4?
yeah.
I feel the
4B.
same way about this one.
What's that?
I feel the same way about this one.
Okay.
Make a motion to remove it.
I'll second.
Any further conversation?
I just agree. I think Derek's raised a good point. I said this a few weeks ago. There's too many.
Where do you see the town?
What's really important.
I was
gonna say, this is-
Not our issue.
this
I
is-
mean, whatever. But it does all come together for the folks.
Hopefully we'll be
right?
on the
It's
front.
all
Exactly, just make sure they hit us ours first.
How many do they have?
17.
How many of them were actual expenses?
What's really important?
And
Agenda.
and not just use funds at the end of the year?
Several. So what do we have in the capital reserve fund right now?
Just 106?
I think 106, correct?
Yeah, like 50.
No,
No,
the
the,
special.
Spend.
Oh, special,
106.
106,000. Give you that.
I don't think we've ever tapped into that, right?
I am with logic, I can't get into any of my networks.
The purpose of this one, Frank, if I'm not mistaken, was to make the budget a little tighter,
Right.
or a little,
Basically, what we were doing is we were going to be eliminating, being tighter on the things in sped.
right, instead of guessing worst-case scenario, we're gonna
Instead
bring it
of
more
always
close.
saying, well, we have to have X, we're always going to, this is the maximum cost of everything, instead of taking a little bit of conservative viewpoint on that, so.
Yeah, the easiest example of that, I think, that Devin would explain to you was the transportation, because she has to budget as if those students that were required to transport are going on one bus, one student to that location, and then if you've heard Devin explain before, it's not until right before the start of the school year, she's able to partner up some of those students with other districts who have the students going to the same or close proximity locations, which now creates a ride share versus a one student transport. But she still has to budget as if that may occur.
And I guess I understand the concept. I don't think it'll, either way, the budget committee's gonna, even if we're budgeting conservatively, the budget committee slashes the transportation budget anyway, so I don't know if it changes anything really.
All those in favor of removing Article 5? Aye. Opposed?
I
You'll get beat up a little bit less tomorrow night.
Now Article 6, which is now Article 4.
Make a motion to approve Article 6.
Second.
Any discussion?
So, if the warrant doesn't pass,
can't do it, yeah.
We have money at the end of the year,
You can't pave it.
can't do it. I mean, I would think that they will vote for it, but just, that's my only.
I guess.
Well, you know, one of the selling point, what I'm thinking is, we had money at the end of this year, and one of the thoughts was possibly repaving, but we felt it was important that the public made that decision. Rather than just, I mean, that's a big chunk of money, and that's what we talked about. It's like, it'd be one thing if it's a couple $1,000 patch of the parking lot, but the fact we're talking this kind of money, I think it's important that we put it out there.
So, why not add the other 55,000 to it? That completes the full renovation of the GMS parking lot.
So I think $47,000 is probably easy to sell and go back for the remainder of the following year.
Well, we were supposed to do that, but we were already supposed to do that. And we didn't, no, because we were gonna do the whole parking lot.
Right.
We're gonna, I think we just did the new parking
Just
lot
did the
left, we
parking-
didn't do the circle.
Went to the circle
or
or the
back.
extended one, yeah.
So Mike, you know, again.
If that's the
I
case,
think this needs to be done,
Yeah.
but I also think the other thing needs to be done because people are walking through that parking lot in that area and stuff like that.
I do too, but I almost see them as like two separate entities, so I think the playground is separate from the parking lot part itself.
Do two warrants.
Yeah, you can do a second warrant, I mean, for this year if you wanted to, for the other part of the parking lot.
We have a recent quote, though?
But,
We have a
no, we
recent
have,
quote.
well, we have the updated one from 2 years ago that,
Yes.
Oil's going down, it's fine.
actually, that's probably a good thing. The cost of tar is going down.
The labor's going up, though, so it's balanced.
Yeah.
But we have to do one and then, you know, get the other one done the following year or something like that.
Yeah.
We gotta finish that parking lot.
Yes, we do. Before we have to start over again.
Because inevitably, LMS parking lot is not far behind,
Yep.
because it's in pretty rough shape too.
So there's a
So
motion
you
for
mean-
Article 6.
The little parking lot with the waves isn't really for skateboards?
Or surfing.
Kind of like a skateboard park.
It is.
Turn it into that.
We have, and, you know, as far as out of the, nobody can see it, so, you know, people are flying all over.
Was there a motion for Article 6?
There was.
Yeah.
And a
Second. Any further conversation? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 500. So what do we do with Article 1?
Vote down.
I'm with Derek, we don't really need the number to take the vote. I don't know if we do legally, but-
Well,
You can do-
Figures in it.
And you know where it is today.
Guessing they're not adding back a whole lot tomorrow.
Look, I don't believe anybody's gonna support the budget as it sits today. I won't vote that, I'll tell you that right now. So I think we ought to give the budget committee the opportunity to fix the things they've done.
Yep.
If they do, then, you know, we heard, again, the budget committee wants to see everybody get along, somebody from the budget committee. And, again, I find it very frustrating with the, again, budget committee. Everybody votes yes on all the reductions. You know, there's no dissenting votes that the reduction is outside of bounds. And of course, up until yesterday, I never saw them actually vote money back in. And instead of giving them $12,000, they gave the town $52,000 for the same process, so.
Do we even have to vote until, I mean, until after the hearing, it's not final, right? At what point we have to?
We could probably
People wait till
convene
after the Liberty even.
after the meeting there. Because, you know, the voters could easily come in and tell them how disappointed they are with what they've done, and hopefully they'll take that under advisement and meet and make changes. You know, so hopefully there'll be enough people around to sway them.
I don't think you actually have to recommend or not recommend until it's ready to go to ballot.
Right until after deliberative. Right.
Yeah, because it could change substantially, which would change your.
Yeah, because last
vote on
year,
Article 1.
the budget committee voted, they came in and
Revoted it.
revoted to not support the budget because of some dollars that were added in by the community.
Yeah.
So you folks can do the same. Just have to do it obviously before we have to send it.
Okay. So we're done with warrants. We have the default budget.
You have a copy of the default budget that was discussed previous, and there were a few changes made, not to the last presentation, but prior to that. So the default budget that was discussed at the last meeting for the June $7,903. And again, I'm rebooting my computer a third time, but by comparison today, I believe the default budget by comparison to where the budget committee is for the school district's budget is approximately $136,000 higher than the non-budget committee, with nothing but a change. So again, we've heard before, and I believe the district's had a past experience of the default budget being higher than the recommended budget of that work.
Yeah, but also at the same time, the budget committee has cut almost $200,000 off of the budget that, again, is direct conflict with either contracts or whatever, so.
Well, the other thing with, going back to Article 1 also, that the default budget can still continue to change, correct? Don't you have up to like the end of the month?
Yeah, but the default budget should be pretty much set by now, because the rules on the default budget are pretty straightforward,
Right.
and as long as we follow those rules, then.
It's a math computation,
Yeah.
as
Okay.
we've seen. It's not a whole lot. You folks can question some of the numbers and how they were computed, but to the extent that, and people will argue that it's the same level, is it level of services or level of appropriation? Well, without the appropriation, you can't provide the same level of services, and without some, you have contractual increase. And there's been a lot of discussion over the 5 years I've been doing this regarding, electricity. So they're gonna keep the lights on the same amount of time, but if energy costs are going up, then that should be reflected in your default. But we need to do that this year. We didn't do it last year.
The only number I have a question on is the curriculum review schedule. So I think the logic here is that since there's a review plan in place that's been approved, that you can increase that number and it's not a flat line?
Again, that's one of those gray areas.
Okay. Has Gordon looked at this at all yet, or?
No, good.
Okay.
Yeah, this isn't a legal review. This is really just, if you look at the RSA, lined up 10 people, and they'll give you different technical interpretations, but it's very open. Some could argue that, well, purchasing new textbooks, replacing textbooks, and you can't deliver the same service you did next year, you get this year. Some would argue that it's in the curriculum, thing that you have to hold on.
I know we had a big discussion back, I think it was 2 years ago, where we tried to put all of our new Common Core curriculum into the default budget. And our reasoning was that it's state mandated, we have to do it. And then I think we got so conflicted, we did finally go to Gordon, and Gordon, I think, said, yeah, no.
Good try.
I mean, you can go to Gordon, but then you're going to get a legal review, and I'd
Yeah.
rather have the board maintain the opportunity to have that discussion and make that decision and go with it. Because again, the RSA regarding I know the state legislature dealt with that last year. They wanted to bring some definition on how to
exactly how to do
basically
it.
plug in the numbers to the categories and give you a template.
Yeah.
But even they couldn't. And again, I'll remind you, as you've heard me say, that 75% of the default budget is salaries and benefits.
Yeah.
So, and then to the extent there's some discretionary areas on the level of service. And that, as you can see, makes up the overwhelming majority of the increase in the default. From the current fiscal year, the contractual CBA requirements.
All right, so we need to approve the default budget?
I don't want that gray area. I'll make a motion to remove the 44,042 for curriculum review. Just because I think in the past we've always flatlined it. No, it is no.
What's made up of that? Well, I'll let you get a second first.
I'll second it, so we can talk about it.
What's made up of that 44042 again? Now you can't get into your,
I think it's just matching, I think this year our curriculum number is 136,245, based upon our review plan. That's the number we have up.
but we also moved dollars around.
It's not that,
We
is
moved
it?
dollars from the high school.
If that's the case, it wouldn't be.
And we moved dollars from all the schools to the curriculum reviews. So we moved costs out of the schools and moved it here. Because this is where the book purchases are coming. So I think that number is correct in the fact that we pulled it out of CHS and LMS, out of their budgets, and put it over here. So I wouldn't recommend any vote to remove anything until we get a better explanation of where that money is. Because if it's supposed to be there because it's cost of
Yeah, oh,
books
absolutely.
and whatever,
Yeah,
then
absolutely.
removing it would make no sense.
Do you know the answer to that, Frank?
I'm getting it.
Okay.
For some reason, I would only come up with the district-wide, I know it was based on Dr. Heon's schedule that was approved by the board, I believe, 2 years ago, which was a 5-year plan on textbook replacement, textbook new. Let me see if I can get that. Give me a few minutes. All right. I'm getting document recovery messages, so.
It's not looking so good there.
This is not going well for you.
Let's hope it works better tomorrow night.
I can email as soon as I get that information. Might not be tonight. It was definitely based on the information provided by Dr. Eon. But again, it has to do with, on a more global, the plan that was approved by the board to replace textbooks and to bring in new textbooks. Now, again, the argument is to, you know, what I mean, you could say, well, that's, we did what we did this year. It's not, that's I've heard the argument's a one-time expenditure. And it's not a recurring that must take place, not deliver the same level of services next year as we did.
Yeah, I don't think it's one time. I think it's just, I think you flatline it is what you do. I think it's what we've always done anyway. But if that,
How did it work on the technology plan? Because isn't it the same? I mean, unless
same
there's.
thing, basically, yeah.
Yeah, conceptually, we did the same thing with the tech plan. Yeah, it's not.
Do we want to wait then until we can definitively answer?
Not that we have to do it yet, right?
If the
No.
technology plan is up, we've sometimes justified it by virtue of the fact that we're following our 5-year board-approved plan.
Yeah.
That's what Frank's saying.
So what if
as
we
far
were,
as
what if
the
we
book.
were consistent last year then? Did we do it for technology last year but not for curriculum? Can't remember.
I think that, I don't know if it was, I remember we had a conversation with Gordon on that, but I don't know if he, you know, I always thought that he was on the side that if you have a plan in place and you're implementing your plan, and that's what you've been doing, then you have a plan in place. I mean, that's what you're doing. You're doing that process. So I don't know if the default value stops that plan. You know, you can go through and you read it. It's not a one-time expense.
Yeah. No.
It's an ongoing expense. And the plan for this year is for this amount of money to be spent on that plan. So It's no different than the transportation contract, where.
That's a legal contract, though.
Right, that's clear, that's why
But
I'm
at
saying
the-
it's technology.
But we have to look at our, well, you know, the technology, part of the technology plan is, because it's different devices and stuff and how they're coming about.
Oh, leases are absolutely contract, yeah.
So,
The tech plan has a little bit more meat because it's
There's leases and
required
stuff
by the
in it,
state.
yeah.
You have to approve it as a board, it has to be submitted to the state. Curriculum is a kind of an in-house.
That might be why Gordon always said it's part of the, because it's approved by the state and
Yeah,
everything.
it's, in the state, it's required.
Yeah.
That you fulfill as best you can.
Okay.
But again, curriculum, and I've dealt with Gordon in my previous, same thing. Say, it's really up to the board how you want to position the need to replace those texts or buy the new text.
No, we can still wait at this point to find out. You want to remove your motion?
Yeah, that's fine. Remove the motion.
Mary? Okay. We'll just hold off as far as the default. Alright. Let's bring us to right to know, first read.
Were we gonna get legal advice on this? Is that what we're waiting for?
Nope. Just, it's a substantive change.
It made so much change. That was,
Number reading.
mine's just a small group of us here, John and I, and Brian, I think. Supervision. Everybody was here.
This is actually,
Didn't you ask for legal?
this is consistent with conversations that we've had in Gordon and presentations that have happened at South Central from the School Boards Association.
I think you were concerned about requiring the 30 cent per page photocopy.
School Boards Association recommends 50.
Is that still in the budget? Did they cut that? Rejoining the School Board Association?
We'll put in anticipated revenue.
I'll make a motion to approve KBA, right to know, public's right to know for first reading.
Nobody requested at our last meeting for somebody to take that to attorney.
Huh?
Let's go back to the minutes.
Did we? No, we didn't.
We talked about it at our last meeting, but nobody requested that it go to attorney review.
I think it's because we left the discretion also to the superintendent as far as whether he's going to charge or not charge, and worry about it then if something occurred. I'll second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right.
Crazy, something.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain. All right. Brings us to new business. Manifest. Any questions?
No, I'm just looking ahead to non-public.
What's that?
Just groaning and looking ahead to one of the topics. Like, what is that doing there? Oh.
All right, community forum? Very good, then we'll go into non-public session, RSA 91-A semicolon 311.
There's a lot of fans.
They all
I
left?
thought they were coming.
It's too cold.
Staying warm.
Just staying warm.
Hey, the dismissal, promotion, or
Since when
compensation?
do we cancel school because it's cold out?
Yeah, really. Any public employee or disciplining of such employee of investigation of charges against them unless the employee affected, one, has the right to the meeting, B,